likely seen a regression of U.S. warships and an announced deal. But while the two nations discuss their options, both send regular threats that should an escalation or attack occur, both have made clear that neither will be holding back. Any escalation will drag the entire region, including Israel, into another war against the Islamic regime in Iran. Now, here to help us break down where we stand is Azriel Bermant, senior researcher at the Institute of International Relations of Prague. Azriel, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
So everyone here in Israel, wants to know, when will the strike from Iran happen? People, they want to prepare, they want to know, but there are literally no clear answers on this issue. And on the one hand, it seems like the further away that we get from the mass protests that took place in Iran, and obviously the subsequent murder of these thousands of protesters, and that the less likely it is that Trump will order a strike. But on the other hand, we also wait to see when Trump will decide that negotiations are going nowhere and diplomacy doesn't work and doesn't do the trick anymore, therefore warranting a strike on the Islamic regime. So what is your assessment of this, sort of game of limbo that we're playing?
Well, there have been some signs that President Trump may be looking for an off-ramp, hence the talk about the fact he's saying that the Iranians are looking, they're talking about a nuclear deal, they're negotiating. Of course, we don't know how far they really are willing to do so. But this is, in a way, maybe reminiscent of the height of the protests against the regime, when Trump promised he would take action, and then at the last minute said that the regime's promised not to execute protesters, and that was just kind of his way out. So at the moment, we know that Turkey has been holding talks. The Turkish foreign minister met with the Iranian foreign minister on Friday, and there's clearly strong regional efforts. Saudis, the Egyptians, Oman, Qatar, all are very keen to see some kind of diplomatic solution, and they're pressuring both the Iranians and the Trump administration to try and get back to the negotiating table.
It really seems like nobody wants this sort of, war to ensue or a strike to happen. Nobody wants to drag the region into war, but this takes us back to the nuclear issue, because Trump seems very adamant to negotiate with Iran over their nuclear weapons. And in Israel, there are actually growing worries that Trump could negotiate a deal with the regime that would only cover the issue of nuclear weapons and not the ballistic missile program, which in effect is really the biggest threat to Israel. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that Trump could end up just being consumed by this nuclear threat to ignore the ballistic missiles?
There's two issues here. First of all, we need to be realistic. I cannot see any way in which the Islamic Republic of Iran would be willing to negotiate their ballistic missiles. And we know it's pretty clear that they have tried to, they have made efforts to try and reconstitute their missile program. The missile for Iran, it's vital for in their eyes, for their survival. So I simply cannot. I don't believe the regime would sign any deal on their missiles. In fact, and as for the nuclear program, again, I cannot see any way in which the regime would agree to give up their nuclear program. But I can see some kind of willingness to maybe return to some kind of nuclear deal time for the regime. The question is, how far would they be willing to compromise? For example, the issue of inspections. We know that there's been a problem with they would refuse to allow the inspections to resume, and that will be a sticking point, for example. So I think on that front, there may be room for bargaining in terms of a nuclear deal, but certainly not the sort of deal that maybe the Netanyahu government is hoping for.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that there may be room to negotiate, I mean, this is very reminiscent to me of, as you can recall, there has been a round of negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear capabilities before the previous strike in June, as I mentioned. There were already talks and negotiations between Tehran and Washington to try and close these gaps and come to some sort of agreement. So what would be different this time around? I mean, wouldn't the regime's insistence on having nuclear capabilities further warrant a strike by the United States and not inspire diplomacy?
Well, you also need to. I mean, we were talking about a president who's been boasting about the fact he claims that he's ended 8 wars in 8 months. It wouldn't look very good for him if he was to start, make a I mean, we just heard the Iranian Supreme Leader warn that this war would not be like the previous war; it would be a full-on regional war, and he's obviously trying to put the frighteners on President Trump, and this is clearly there are concerns for him going down that front, and also for his base. After all, he came to power, again, in the wake of the originally first time around, his first term. The Americans are tired of fighting wars. So it's not. There is. We know that the Trump administration wants to weaken the regime, attack the regime without bringing about a major war in the region. But I don't know. That's easier said than done. So that's why it might be for President Trump, the idea of some kind of negotiation would be appealing for him. But that also has risks, of course, because it would have to be an agreement which would not give loopholes, which would not allow the Iranians to return to enrichment, and there would have to be return of inspectors, and it would not be straightforward. The Iranians are very clever when it comes to negotiations. It would. So either both counts. There are risks for the Trump administration, but certainly a military force has, immediately speaking, does carry a lot of problems for him.
So there's risks to negotiating, there's risks to striking as well. And, if you could play fortune teller for a moment here, how do you predict the next few days or even weeks could unfold?
Well, it's that we mentioned, for example, the satellite. If there were, for example, more were to come to light of the clear evidence that the Iranians are trying to restart the nuclear program, that would put pressure. That would put pressure on the Americans to act, in my view. But at the same time, I think that for the United States has its allies in the region are very concerned about the dangers of a war. And I think that that might be big part of the reason why right now President Trump is maybe talking about trying to find some kind of deal. We were seeing, as I've mentioned, there is the diplomatic process is very much. We've seen intensified diplomatic meetings to try and find a way out. But at the same time, as I said, if there is something that comes to light, that could certainly that might be something which could lead to a resumption of the talking about military force. But there are a lot of things to weigh up. There's also, of course, all sorts of what's going on the domestic front in Minneapolis and all of that. Some say that it's the Iran issue is a convenient distraction. On the other hand, if military force were to be used and we end up having you have a lot of Americans killed, for example, and Iran causes mayhem in the region, then that may not look good for Trump. So I do think that he may try to find a way out, but of course, with President Trump, you never know. And the fact that he used force against him, went on the attack last June, the fact that he authorized a strike on Soleimani in 2019, I mean, 2020, sorry, Trump is prepared to shoot from the hip, but he's also not prepared to get himself into a long-term military confrontation. So, and that is a risk for him. It's all very nice to shoot from the hip, but he doesn't want to get involved in a protracted war.
Absolutely. And, we are almost out of time, but before I do let you go, I just have one more question. Diplomacy seems to be favored at the moment, both for Trump and for the Islamic regime in Iran. But say that is the path that we do end up taking and there is no strike. Is that not a stab in the back for the people of Iran after promising that help was on the way and then not delivering?
Well, the President Trump was over Hastings in promising action, and when he failed to do so, certainly we know that there are a lot of protesters, many protesters, put themselves on the line in the hope that the United States would intervene, and we know there were a lot of talk of betrayal in the wake of this promise but at the same time we had Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, saying last week that regime change, that this is a regime that's been around a long time. It's not something you can do one moment to the next. It's all very, the use of military force. I mean, in Israel and I think in the United States, it is accepted that carrying, aerial strikes on the regime isn't going to lead in and of itself to a removal of the regime of the Ayatollahs. It's something that, it's not something that will happen from one day to the next. So I'm not sure how much of a difference it will really make, this kind of action that we're talking about, especially because, as I said, I don't think President Trump wants to get embroiled in a very long, protracted military struggle with the Iranians.
Azriel Berman, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us your analysis. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And the IDF has released footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis by the Yellow Line. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons hidden inside. This after a weekend development that saw 32 Palestinians killed in IDF airstrikes targeting Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah. According to the army, 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. And while the Gaza fighting continues despite the ongoing ceasefire agreement, today, the IDF is preparing to open the Rafah border crossing, as promised, symbolizing the official transformation into Phase 2. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip, as Israel and Egypt work to ensure the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapons smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, so medical patients, dual citizens, and others, will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. With the NCAG, or the technocratic Palestinian body set to govern Gaza and replace Hamas, well, they have no official entry date, so Rafah will be open and Hamas will still be in charge. And joining me now to discuss these Gaza developments is Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch. Itamar, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So the report I just gave on the Rafah border crossing opening and the other report I gave of the deadly escalations, they seem so detached. It's like two different realities on the ground. How do you explain this disconnect between, on the one hand, the desire to open Rafah and move to phase two, but on the other hand, the reality, which is that Hamas is still very much armed and very much in control in Gaza?
You're absolutely right. There's a complete disconnect between the reality, what was promised with the agreement, and what's actually happening in Gaza, and that's so critical. The and one of the reasons this is happening, let's go back to the basics. The Trump and the whole plan built up or was built around three different groups of people. The first one is his Board of Peace, which is headed by Trump and has on it lots of world leaders, also Marco Rubio and Witkoff. And many people see this as he's trying to create a replacement for the United Nations. This would be a body that would resolve international conflicts, not just in Gaza, but around the world. So he's thinking very, very large with this board piece. The second thing, or let me go, the second thing is the International Stabilization Force. Now, this was the military force that was supposed to come in and accomplish just what you were talking about now, which is take away Hamas's weapons, make sure that all the tunnels are destroyed, fight Hamas if necessary. And the interesting thing is, and not surprising, is that no countries want to join this international stabilization force. No countries want to put their soldiers in Gaza to be responsible for fighting Hamas, which is essentially what they'd have to do. So that when you're talking about now the terrorists coming out of tunnels, and you're talking about the incredible infrastructures that still exist, the body that was supposed to be created under the peace agreement just isn't being created because no one wants to be a part. No country wants to be a part that Israel will allow. Certainly Turkey and Qatar would like to be a part. Israel won't allow those countries because it will be a farce.
Right. And so there's really, like you say, this big disconnect. And I'm curious, why is the IDF facilitating and allowing for the opening of Rafah? I mean, it's very clear to everybody here in Israel that this is a bad move. We're doing it with our heads down. There seems to be this big rush to move on to phase two, but Hamas are still there. They're still popping out of tunnels and they're still armed. So the minute we open the Rafah crossing, we get more weapons smuggling from Egypt until the technocratic government comes in and does what they're supposed to do, which is disarm Hamas, which is yet to be seen whether or not they'll be successful or not. Before they even attempt to, we're going to have a few days where the Rafah crossing is open and Hamas are still there. So what do these few days do to Hamas, and what is the danger for Israel?
Well, Israel went along with the opening of Rafah because, as opposed to many of the different things in the 20-point plan, Trump's 20-point plan, as opposed to many things which talked about a progression, the opening of Rafah actually had a specific date. I think it was January 19th, and that date we've passed already. So Israel didn't want to be seen as the one that is causing the whole process to stop. Now, the United States is very interested in going on to phase two because they don't want the process to stop either. Because Trump has been presenting himself internationally as the peacemaker. You know, there's no doubt he's talked about the Nobel Peace Prize. And if it all falls apart right now, even before it gets started, then it's a failure. So he wants to see it going, continuing going. Israel is an ally of the United States, and the same way the United States helps Israel, Israel helps the United States. And in this case, that means opening the Rafah border and allowing a process to continue, even though it's even though it's missing a fundamental piece. So it's sort of something we're doing for the United States. Now, just recognize this is supposed to be only civilians going back and forth. In the meantime, it's not supposed to have any goods. No trucks are going to be going back and forth with supplies. So that the fear of this becoming what it was in the past, an avenue to bring in weapons for Hamas, that's not going to happen right now. And I don't think Israel would ever allow that to happen. But like I said, it's important for Israel to be an ally of the United States and help them to go on with this process. I think at a later point, Trump will realize that the process is going nowhere because Hamas is not willing and will never be willing to give up its arms. But I think Israel is waiting for the United States to reach that understanding on their own. And I would just point out another thing is that now is not a good time for Israel to get into a crisis with the United States, with an impending attack against Iran. Could be 24 hours away or 3 days or a week, but it's going to happen. So Israel doesn't want to be in any which way, in any way, in friction with the United States at this point, and that could be also part of the decision to open up Rafah. Now, I want to mention one more thing. You talked about, there's a third part. We talked about the Board of Peace, and we talked about the military international stabilization force. The third part that's supposed to take over in Gaza is the 15-member technocratic committee, and they're supposed to be like a governing board for Gaza. Now, I just want to read something to you. Palestinian Media Watch, we just translated some very shocking material about the head of this committee. His name is Ali Shah. And he is presented as a technocrat, a non-political person. He's leading it. Now, we have found an interview of his from April of this year, before he was appointed, of course, and even suggested there was no committee at that point that was even be discussed. And I want you to listen to some of the things that he said in that interview, which we will be subtitling and releasing in the next few days.
I'd love if you could give us like a short little recap of it. That's great.
Okay, so first of all, he defines Israel as follows: this colonialist who was planted by American and Western Europe. They planted it in Palestine ever since the Balfour Promise, the Balfour Declaration. This is the colonialist. He is denying Israel's historical right to exist. He's denying Israel's history. This is classic Palestinian Authority demonization of Israel by claiming that we don't have a right to exist. We are only a colonial implant. And that is how this head of this committee, who's supposed to be non-political, that's how he identifies Israel. In that interview, he a number of times refers to Israel as he doesn't say Israel by name. He talks about the occupation, which again is Palestinian Authority ideology. Don't refer to Israel as a state, just as the occupation. And he also gloated about the fact that years ago on Land Day, and I'm quoting to you now, like every Palestinian, I did an activity with young people at schools and demonstrations against the Israeli occupation. We'd stand in areas where there are checkpoints and throw rocks at them. We set this day ablaze. I was actually the organizers of this activity in the city of Khan Yunis. So here he is bragging about his fighting Israeli soldiers. So the person who is supposed to lead a group of people who are going to be involved in making peace is himself proud of his terror past and refuses to recognize Israel's right to exist as a legitimate state.
And this is the body that's also supposed to replace Hamas and help disarm Hamas. So there's clearly no guarantee for Israel that security for the long term on Israel's southern border, that Israel can secure its southern border, is basically what you're saying.
Absolutely not. The belief, first of all, the only way the Hamas is ever going to leave is going to be if it's destroyed, unfortunately, by war, by Israel. We'll have to resort to that probably. But this government, even were it to rule afterward, even after Israel destroys Hamas, if this were the committee that would be in place, where we already know that the head of it doesn't even recognize Israel's historical right to exist, how can we expect them to build a peaceful Gaza? How can they expect them to change the messages? A person who's proud of his terror past. So literally the entire fantasy of creating this technocratic thing has to be done, has to be rebuilt. It has to be rethought out, and it needs people who really want peace. And it's going to be very hard to find them.
So just to recap, really, there's all of these movements and all of these developments, the opening of the Rafah border, the technocratic government, and all of these are things that Israel is very well aware will not succeed in achieving the goals that Israel had already stated, which is the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and creating a peaceful and prosperous Gaza Strip. None of these actions are going to work, and Israel is just sitting back and waiting for Washington to realize it?
I think so. Like I said, nothing is going to happen in terms of the United States recognizing this or giving Israel the go-ahead on Gaza to destroy Hamas until after the United States is finished with Iran. We have no idea how long that's going to take. But at some point, hopefully it'll be fast, hopefully it'll be quick, hopefully it'll be very successful. And then after having destroyed Iran's government, the United States will have to turn back toward Gaza and ultimately recognize that October 7th for every Israeli means that Hamas has to be destroyed. It can't be, okay, we'll let them sort of be in the background. No, they have to be destroyed. Every Israeli understands that. And he'll then hopefully give Israel the okay and say, okay, Israel, move ahead and do what you have to do.
Itamar, I'd love to continue picking your brain on this topic. There's so much more to discuss, but we are unfortunately out of time. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us your analysis.
Thank you.
And moving on, today the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Israel from October 8th, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when a ceasefire was finally signed through U.S. mediators. Today, Netanyahu announced that a university will be built in the city in an effort to also attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated from this northern city to finally return home. And Israel is facing an unprecedented heat wave in the middle of January. A dust storm from North Africa has entered the region, causing unusually hot weather in this winter month. Strong winds are set to pick up, and the Meteorological Service says dry southern air will push temperatures up to around 25 degrees in the mountains and nearly 30 degrees in the coastal plain. That's, of course, in Celsius, and the northern Negev, levels that Israel has not seen since 1987. And before we go, we've got some exciting news. You can now get Israel updates on our WhatsApp channel. Breaking stories, live updates, and verified reports, all delivered fast and accurate. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen right now to join and get all of the action. And that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. I'm Diva Klein. I want to thank you so much for joining us on ILTV on the Hour, and I hope to see you again at our very next update. Thank you.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. And now we can finally report on some good news this evening. The IDF has announced today that it has recovered the body of the last hostage taken captive by Hamas on October 7th, Ran Gvili. Joining us now in the studio with all the details is ILTV's India Naftali. India, so incredible to be able to report that all the hostages are finally back home in Israel.
Absolutely, Lidar. I mean, there are absolutely no more hostages in Gaza. This is the first time in a decade that this has been the reality. Ran Gvili was a 24-year-old police officer who died in battle on October 7th. His family has been waiting a painstakingly long time for his return, advocating with tears out in Hostage Square at the protest, speaking out. And finally, they're getting the closure they deserve to see their son finally home. The operation started this weekend for his search, and it, of course, ended just now. What does that mean? First of all, he will have his burial in Israel. He was successfully identified. His family has been updated, and they now know. And now what we are going to see is the Rafah opening. It was actually quite controversial. This Rafah opening is, why would we open the Rafah border if all of our hostages have not been returned? That was a big question in Israel's security cabinet. And now that Ran Gvili's been returned, it does seem that there will be no questions. The Rafah opening, the Rafah crossing will be opened, and that will probably happen as soon as they can. Now, with the Rafah opening, this is something that they've been talking and delaying because of this very issue of our hostages still being in Gaza. And now that Ran Gvili is home, there should be no issue. Now, what we see is, this is 2 years 2 years, long years of advocacy and diplomacy and searching, and we're finally going to see Ron home.
So incredibly happy to be able to report on that today. And of course, we are officially entering phase 2 now with all the hostages back home. India, thank you so much for sharing the update.
Thank you so much, Lidar.
And now the final hostage to be returned from Gaza, Ran Gvili, has been laid to rest. His funeral took place today in southern Israel. Gvili was just 24 years old when he was killed defending Kibbutz Alumim during the October 7th attacks. His body was abducted into the Gaza Strip, and it took more than 2 years for the IDF to recover his remains. ILTV's India Naftali joins us now from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. India, what can you tell us about today's funeral?
Sivan, it's been an emotional 2 years of waiting for every hostage to come home. While today is a day the country grieves, what I am hearing from Israelis is that Ran Gvili's proper burial offers the nation some much-needed closure. The casket of Master Sergeant Ran Gvili was escorted by a police motorcade this morning to his hometown in southern Israel. Gvili, who served as a police officer in Israel's Special Yassam unit, was honored by fellow police officers who lined the route to pay their final respects. At the funeral, thousands were in attendance. There, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog both gave a eulogy.
אנחנו פעלנו ואנחנו מצאנו את רני. בכך השגנו את מה שייחלנו לו 843 ימים, להחזיר את כל אחינו ואחיותינו הביתה. וזה עדיין לא סוף פסוק. אנחנו דבקים גם ביעדינו האחרים, לפרק את החמאס מנשקו, לפרז את הרצועה, וגם את זה נשיג. ידעו מבקשי נפשנו שמי שמניף יד על ישראל ישלם מחיר כבד מנשוא.
Gvili's family also gave moving and emotional remarks.
אני טלי גבילי, אמא גאה של רן גבילי, שוטר יס"מ, חטוף, הראשון לצאת, האחרון לחזור, האחרון שחזר.
אני כל כך גאה להיות אבא שלך, ואתה חסר לי כל שנייה, כל שנייה וכל דקה. אוהב אותך, אוהבים אותך, מתגעגעים אליך. תודה רבה לכולם על הכבוד שאתם נותנים לנו. זה הכבוד בשבילו, לא בשבילנו. תודה.
On the morning of October 7th, 2023, Ran Gvili messaged his friends that he had been shot in the leg. That was the last time he was heard from. They later came to learn that he had been killed and abducted into Gaza. Earlier this week, the IDF recovered his body in a cemetery in eastern Gaza City. Gvili, a young man who loved life, motorcycles, his family, and his country, has finally been laid to rest. And also yesterday evening, the clock here in Hostage Square that used to be counting the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds that the hostages have been in Gaza finally stopped at 843 days, 12 hours, 5 minutes, and 59 seconds, officially closing what is one of the most painful chapters of Israel's history. Sivan, for the last time from Hostage Square, back to you.
Thank you very much, India.
And with the return of the final Israeli hostage, Ran Gvili, to Israel, the Rafah crossing can now be opened and Trump's phase 2 of his Gaza plan can commence. Israel has agreed to a partial reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt, but said it will continue to monitor remotely all people and goods passing through it. Speaking with the Axios news site, President Trump praised Hamas for what he said was its cooperation in helping locate the body of Ran Gvili. But he also stressed the terror group must now lay down its weapons in accordance with the U.S. brokered peace agreement, saying now we have to disarm Hamas like they promised. A senior U.S. official also told reporters that those Hamas terrorists who agree to lay down their arms will be granted amnesty as per the peace deal, and that reconstruction of the Gaza Strip will only begin with the demilitarization of the territory. The official added that Israel will be expected to carry out a full withdrawal from Gaza as that process takes place, though Israeli officials have said they expect that would only happen after Hamas is fully disarmed.
President Donald Trump has formally launched his new Board of Peace at a signing ceremony in Davos, Switzerland, saying the body will help manage global conflicts, starting with Gaza. But while some countries have joined, others are holding back. Spain has publicly declined to take part. Germany says the plan needs changes, and the European Union is raising legal and political concerns. Meanwhile, President Trump announced that Canada's invitation has been withdrawn. ILTV's India Naftali has more for us on this matter. India, what can you share?
Yes, Sivan, last week's signing marks a major step for President Trump's new Board of Peace, which he says will help enforce ceasefires and coordinate reconstruction after wars. The initiative is already attracting support from some countries, including several in the Middle East, while others are still deciding whether or not they'll join or stay out. President Donald Trump held a signing ceremony Thursday in Davos to formally launch his new Board of Peace. At the ceremony, Trump's senior advisor, Jared Kushner, unveiled a $25 billion plan to rebuild Gaza and turn it into an economic hub by the year 2035. The plan focuses on infrastructure, private investment, and job creation. But the new board is already facing resistance in Europe. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced his country will not join.
Tras haberlo consultado con muchos de los países, tras haberlo meditado durante bastantes semanas, hoy he querido trasladar a los colegas del Consejo Europeo el que el Gobierno de España ha decidido no participar a la llamada Junta de Paz. Agradecemos la invitación, pero declinamos el participar en esa junta propuesta por la administración estadounidense.
Sanchez disapproves of the board, saying it operates outside the United Nations system and does not include the Palestinian Authority. Germany's chancellor also said Berlin cannot join under the current structure, citing constitutional concerns, but left the door open for future cooperation. The European Union's Foreign Policy Service has gone further, warning in an internal document that the board gives too much power to President Trump and departs from the limited mandate approved by the UN for Gaza. Meanwhile, President Trump announced on Truth Social that he is withdrawing Canada's invitation to the Board of Peace, although he did not give a reason why.
And as tensions mount from Iran to Gaza, we're now joined by retired Colonel Rich Outzen, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, to help us break down what could come next and what it means for Israel. Thank you, Rich, for joining.
Good to be with you.
So we're witnessing a serious U.S. military presence in the region. What message does it send to Iran at the moment, and what is your assessment of an imminent attack?
Well, I think this is a very difficult deterrent situation. I think obviously President Trump, with regards to Iran, is trying to deter the regime from carrying out further massacres of its own people. As you know, Trump's position has been a little bit more reserved maybe than Jerusalem's on this. I think both the attacks on the nuclear program that happened last year and maybe further steps to destabilize the regime. There's many in the region, including in Israel, that would like to see a more forward position. Trump's been a little bit more inclined to say, well, let's try to modify their behavior. But with the news coming out that you've reported that maybe as many as 30,000 Iranian civilians, most of them young demonstrators, were killed by the regime in a 48-hour period, that cannot stand. Trump wants to be a peacemaker, and if it goes on his record that the greatest massacre of civilians since Babi Yar in World War II era, it was while he was trying to deter Iran, it's a bad look. So I think he's sending a message of possible punitive steps and also certainly deterrence to any further massacres of civilians.
So it is indeed a bad look for Trump, but it appears as if a strike is still likely. But I wonder, under what conditions might Washington and Trump end up holding back?
Well, I think, Trump's a deal maker, so he's going to be looking for specific terms with regards to Iran's regional role. Iran's position, not just its nuclear program, but regionally, has taken massive blows, as you know, over the last year and a half, both because of Israel's military operations, because of operations against the Houthis and the Saudis reasserting themselves in Yemen, the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. So I think Trump's going to be looking for a modus vivendi, some sort of indication from the Iranians that they're going to stop. They're just going to stop this failed attempt to destabilize and control their neighbors, and that also that they're going to engage in some sort of more meaningful dialogue on the nuclear program. We can't let them reconstruct that, not from Israel's perspective and not from the Americans. I think the nuclear negotiations, that file probably remains central to this. And if they continue to prevaricate and obfuscate, then I think a strike becomes more likely.
Mm-hmm. Now, Iran has said any attack on its leadership would be an all-out war. What would a conflict like that look like, in your opinion? And what risks does that pose for Israel? What should Israel brace for?
Well, I think we've seen sort of the extent of Iran's capabilities to directly strike, either at the U.S. Through naval means and mines and rockets and missiles, and also the ability to, or the attempt to strike at Israel directly with air assets, with drones primarily, but also missiles. They're just not that good at it. The Iranians have neglected their conventional forces and their air and air defense forces for, well, the entire period since the revolution in 1979 in favor of these sort of quasi-clandestine proxy wars that they have fought. I think we could indeed see another wave of launched drones and missiles sent at Iran. I think that there are Iranian sleeper cells in Europe and the United States, not so much in Israel, that could engage in sabotage. I think they'll try, and they've tried in the past, direct assassinations. We know that there's been Iranian agents arrested in the United States previously for trying to assassinate Iranian dissidents and even to try to go after U.S. political figures up to and including the president. They talk a big game. The truth is they have fairly limited direct capabilities to strike, but they can certainly kill some people and blow some things up, and I think that would be what they'll try to do.
Now, moving on to Gaza, the U.S. envoys are pressing to reopen the Rafah crossing, and even before the return of the last deceased hostage, Ran Gvili, what does Israel see as the security risks of opening Rafah?
Well, the risks clearly are that if either the Egyptians or the Palestinian Authority or international forces are running the daily traffic in and out of Rafah, that they are going to not notice remilitarization of Rafah, the rebuilding of tunnels and the smuggling of weapons, and that creates additional lethal risk for the Israeli homeland as well as for forces operating in and around Gaza. That's undeniable. The devil is in the details, though, and the problem here is that Rafah is an important lifeline for the civilians of Gaza, and clearly with the Kushner plan and Witkoff plan to reconstruct Gaza, you've got to have an economic lifeline. So how do you do that? How do you have an economic lifeline that also respects Israel's security red lines? And that's the dilemma. I will tell you, based on my time working in Israel, I spent 4 years and a lot of it dealing with Gaza, this is an eternal dilemma. And the fact is, I think it's the right thing for the U.S. administration to push Israel on this a little bit, not to ignore Israel's concerns, but there is a clear preference for security logic and sort of a deprioritization of economic logic here, and that's not the path to peace. That's just the path to having a few more decades of this same problem. So I understand the Israeli sensitivities, and we do need to do more in terms of security guarantees once Rafah is reopened. But at the same time, I think Kushner and Witkoff are right. Israel needs a little push on this.
Well, thank you for your input, Rich. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
The head of U.S. Central Command, General Brad Cooper, arrived in Israel for high-level talks with senior Israeli officials, with the potential U.S. attack now possibly close enough to send the Iranian leader into his underground bunker. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The visit by General Cooper comes as the United States appears to be near completing its military buildup in the region, including the deployment of the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, warships, destroyers, and additional air power. President Trump confirmed that what he described as a massive armada is moving toward the Middle East, saying the U.S. is getting its assets in place before a potential attack on the regime following its deadly crackdown on anti-government protests.
You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction. And we'll see what happens. Let's hope we have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. But we have for Armada, we have a massive fleet heading in that direction. And maybe we won't have to use it. We'll see.
Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has reportedly been moved to a fortified underground bunker in Tehran amid fears of an imminent American strike. Khamenei's son, Massoud, is reportedly now managing day-to-day communications with government bodies, a sign, according to Israeli analysts, of growing instability and disruption at the very top of the regime. The Iranian military issued a fresh warning. The commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Mohammad Pakpour, said the force is more ready than ever. Finger on the trigger. Pakpour warned the United States and Israel to, quote, avoid any miscalculation. The Iranian people, mostly opposed to the regime, are awaiting the help promised from Trump during the government massacre of its citizens. A new report from Time magazine claims that more than 30,000 people had been killed in Iran during the anti-regime protests earlier this month. The figure quoted two unnamed senior officials in Iran's health ministry and far exceeds the official Iranian toll of just over 3,000 dead.
And as all of these developments unfold and the looming question of U.S. military action in the region grows, CENTCOM have announced that the United States military will conduct a major Air Force exercise in the Middle East. ILTV's Devo Klein has that story.
As American military presence continues to build in the region in anticipation of an escalation against the Islamic regime in Iran, CENTCOM have announced an operational readiness exercise with deployments to contingency sites. The military's goal is to test readiness and demonstrate the ability to deploy, disperse, and sustain combat air power as concerns of a possible confrontation with Iran's regime continues to grow. According to CENTCOM, the exercise is intended to improve the dispersal of assets and personnel, strengthen regional partnerships, and prepare for rapid responses throughout the command's area. Air crews will deploy to multiple contingency locations with the approval of host nations and in close coordination with civilian and military aviation authorities, the statement said. The announcement followed the arrival of the U.S. aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln in the Middle East, accompanied by several warships. Now, with the readiness drill and the U.S. Armada in place and poised to strike, all eyes remain on President Donald Trump to see what comes next.
Despite reports that Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei is hiding in a bunker, the Iranian regime does not seem to be heeding U.S. President Trump's warnings, instead opting to issue threats of its own to the United States. Meanwhile, new details emerge on the scope and horrors of the regime crackdown on protesters. All the details in the following report. A new massive mural was unveiled in Revolution Square in central Tehran, depicting a United States aircraft carrier with destroyed fighter jets and a trail of bloodied red stripes in the waters, resembling the American flag. Alongside the depiction, the caption reads, "If you sow the wind, you will reap the whirlwind." The mural is a direct threat by the regime to the United States, warning against launching a military strike as U.S. warships continue to move towards the region. Meanwhile, Monday marked the 18th day since the onset of massive nationwide protests to bring down the Ayatollah regime, and the 18th consecutive day that the regime severed the internet and any connection of the Iranian people to the outside world. What little videos and testimonies that have managed to make their way out of Iran have shown graphic images of security forces indiscriminately shooting at protesters, massive casualties, and bodies strewn in the streets. A report from Time magazine claims more than 30,000 people may have been killed in the span of 48 hours, a claim the regime denies. And a new report from the New York Times released on Sunday said that on January 9th, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei himself, ordered Iran's Supreme National Security Council to crush the protests by any means necessary. The report cited two Iranian officials who were briefed on this directive. Sources said security forces were ordered to shoot to kill and show no mercy. The Times report also interviewed 24 Iranians in major cities throughout the country, many who spoke anonymously out of fear for their lives. Among them, medical workers who described scenes of horror and chaos as thousands of wounded protesters streamed into hospitals. The doctors described scenes of patients with gunshot wounds to the head and neck, including small children. One doctor described wanting to die as he had to remove both eye sockets of a 13-year-old who was shot by regime forces. The Times report chronicled the atrocities to the early days of the protests, as world leaders were urging Iranians to take to the streets and promising help. But, according to the report, by January 12th, the protests had largely been crushed. And so, as the internet blackout continues and American warships continue to arrive in the Middle East, little is known about the continued scope of the massacres against the Iranian people or the state of their uprising today. Help may be on the way, but is it already too late? For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's Weekly Review. See you next week.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now.
Imagine earning your master's degree on top of Mount Carmel, where forest meets sea and where every day brings a new cultural, academic, and personal adventure. This is the multi-experience at U Haifa International. Here, students from around the world live and learn together in Israel's most culturally diverse city, meeting new people, discovering new perspectives, and shaping their own Israel experience.
There's people from different countries, from different religions and different languages. Somehow we are all very similar.
At U Haifa, academics meet real life. You don't just study, you experience Israel up close, explore Haifa's mountain ocean city life, and build global friendships that last a lifetime.
It's not just a degree, it's an experience. It opens your mind, your network, and your world.
U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
As tensions rise and warnings may come too late, humanitarian groups can't afford to wait. Jamie Geller joins us now to explain how Yad Ezra Shulamit is preparing to ensure no one goes hungry if Israel comes under fire. Jamie Geller, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
So recent reports suggest Israel could receive only minutes warning if the U.S. strikes Iran. What does operating under that level of uncertainty mean for humanitarian organizations like Yad Ezra Shulamit?
The question on everyone's mind is, will there be war? Won't there be war? It's a very unsettling way to live and exist. But the bottom line is we have to be prepared no matter what. We have to make sure that we can get food to the people who are under fire.
And how are you preparing on the ground to respond immediately if the situation escalates?
We must stock the warehouses with ready cooked foods ready to eat. That is really critical to ensure that everyone can actually eat when they are stuck in bomb shelters. We've done this before. We did it in June, and we will do it again. We know what we're doing. Yad Ezra Shulamit actually distributes 12,000 food baskets every single week to 95 distribution points all across Israel. It's critical that the warehouses have ready-cooked meals and ready-to-eat food fully stocked, and therefore we can distribute it north, south, central Israel, all across the country.
Now, security officials say the IDF itself may have short notice ahead of an attack, with the public only notified only once missiles are already being fired. So how do you plan for that?
We don't have the luxury of waiting. We have to prepare now. It's about stocking warehouses, securing logistics, access routes, a tremendous amount of coordination that's needed to ensure that those that may be trapped in bomb shelters for extended periods of time, like the elderly, people with disabilities who don't have the luxury of running in and out and back and forth, but may actually have to shelter in place in their bomb shelter, have food that they need to eat and survive, ready to eat food. And that only happens because we prepare now beforehand.
So has Yad Ezra Shulamit already begun preparations for this round?
Of course, we have already begun preparations, but we need your help in terms of ensuring the warehouses are fully stocked. We need to stock the warehouses, not just in the center of the country, but in the north and the south, so that we can be close to all populations. And of course, we need to be ready in the event of missile impact. We all know what that means and the devastation that that can bring. So we've done this before. We are going to be prepared to do it again, all the while praying to God that there will not be a war. But as a humanitarian organization here in Israel, we need to be prepared. We are on the front lines of ensuring that people have the food they need to survive.
What can the viewers do to help?
As I said, no one wants war. We are praying for peace, but we are on the front lines of ensuring that everyone has the food they need if they are stuck in their bomb shelters for extended periods of time. We are talking about those who cannot afford food, the disabled and the elderly, everyone from the north to the south to the central of Israel. To wait for the first siren is suicide. We must prepare, just as the IDF prepares. The humanitarian organizations of Israel, Yad Ezra Shulamit, must be prepared. We need money for gas for the 15 trucks that will be going to 95 distribution points and beyond, from shelter to shelter, if that's what it takes, to ensure people have the food they need to survive this crisis.
Well, thank you, Jamie. In this time of uncertainty, you can make a difference too. Scan the QR code to help the biggest food distribution organization in Israel, Yad Ezra Shulamit, prepare to respond in case of emergency and feed those in Israel who need it most.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from the region. The possibility of a U.S. strike against Iran is moving dangerously closer. Trump says Tehran wants to negotiate, but has also given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal he considers as fair and just, including a deal in which the regime gives up its nuclear weapons. This is the goal for Donald Trump, and according to the American president, failure to agree to a deal will lead to military action. Have a listen to some of Trump's latest remarks.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only
military
they
action?
know for sure.
Have you communicated that to them
Yeah,
directly?
I have.
You could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons. It said they should do that, but I don't know that they will. But they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
Trump added that an armada is on its way to Iran. A U.S.-guided missile destroyer was seen this morning off the southern port of Eilat. As additional naval and air assets move into the region, all this signals that Washington is positioning for rapid action should the ongoing talks collapse. But the regime, they're threatening back. Ayatollah Khamenei said this morning that if the United States were to open a war front against Iran, the escalation would be regional. As speculation grows, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir visited Washington this weekend to hold high talks with top U.S. officials on what comes next. And moving on to Gaza, where, as promised, the Rafah crossing is opening today, symbolizing the official transformation into Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire plan. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip as Israel and Egypt work to ensure the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapons smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, medical patients, dual citizens, and others will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. With the NCAG, or the technocratic Palestinian body set to govern Gaza and replace Hamas, still with no official entry date, Rafah will be open and Hamas will still be in charge. All of this unfolds in the southern Gaza Strip as the IDF releases footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched for hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons hidden inside. This after a weekend development that saw 32 Palestinians killed in IDF airstrikes targeting Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah, according to the army. 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. And today, the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona, Israel's northernmost city, has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from October 8, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when a U.S.-brokered ceasefire was signed. Today, Netanyahu announced that a university will be built in the city in an effort to attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated to return home. And finally, Israel is facing an unprecedented heat wave in the middle of January. A dust storm from North Africa has entered the region, causing unusually hot weather in this winter month. Strong winds are set to pick up, and the meteorological services say dry southern air will push temperatures up to around 25 degrees in the mountains and nearly 30 degrees in the coastal plain and the northern Negev, levels not seen in Israel since 1987. And before we go, I want to remind you to scan the QR code that's on your screen to get access to our ILTV WhatsApp channel for all of the latest updates and breaking stories. But for now, that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm Diva Klein, and thank you so much for watching and for joining today.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and as you can see, I'm not in studio this week. I'm in Mexico City. Very shortly, I'll be bringing you an exclusive interview with the Israeli ambassador to Mexico to speak about her experience being targeted directly with an assassination plot by the Islamic Republic of Iran. But before we get to that interview, I want to discuss just a few things, the big stories that happened this week that I couldn't wait a whole week to speak with you about. First things first, we have an update about the reality on the ground inside of Iran, because what the regime is reporting to the world doesn't match at all what doctors and witnesses, even that I have spoken to on the ground, have been reporting about what's happening. Now, we know that right now President Trump has said executions that are set to begin inside of Iran were actually stopped. He reported that 800 executions had been canceled. Now, the problem is that the regime itself is openly contradicting that claim by President Trump. We've seen judiciary officials and regime officials, regime-aligned media even publicly denying that any executions were stopped. And in addition to that, we know that there have been numerous executions almost every single day in the past week. Beyond that, there have also been countless extrajudicial killings, which are ongoing, and more on that later. They've also pledged that they will be executing what they call enemies of the state, which, as we know, refers to any protesters. On the ground, doctors inside of Iran are describing something that's very different than what the regime is trying to put forward as the reality of what happened during these protests. There's one physician who told the international media that hospitals are not only overwhelmed with protesters who have been shot and killed at close range with live ammunition, but that we're also seeing a phenomena of gunshot wounds to the chest, to the neck, and to the head in particular, meaning that these regime forces were targeting civilians. Medical staff also say that security forces in many cases have entered the hospitals to arrest injured protesters, and in some cases, they have actually executed them. They've also tear-gassed hospitals, and they have taken over hospitals completely, apparently, according to sources on the ground, all of the public hospitals as well as some of the private hospitals. Doctors are reporting being monitored, being threatened, being forced not to treat injured protesters, and of course, not to speak to media. Now, what we know so far is that according to multiple independent reports, more than 36,500 protesters have been killed in this wave of protests. We also see that medical workers are saying the number, as well as all the sources that I've spoken to in the past few weeks, say the numbers are significantly higher than even that 30,000 count because the regime is doing so much to hide their crimes. It's part of the reason that there's been no internet connectivity, with the exception of those who have special access because they're inside the regime, for over 20 days. Now, while Trump is being told that executions have stopped, regime officials are literally doing the exact opposite, or saying the exact opposite publicly. In recent weeks, senior figures and state-aligned outlets have renewed threats tied to U.S. support for Iranian protesters and Israel, including explicit warnings about any kind of retaliation against American assets and interests in the Middle East. We've also even seen in the past week regime officials threatening President Trump himself. Now, the executions of these protesters is happening after the protests end, which is one of the more alarming things about the phenomenon we're seeing now. And one of those people targeted was Hamid Hamidian. This is someone that I knew personally. Hamid's final post on X was a direct appeal to the U.S. President Trump to act in support of the Iranian people. Now, 2 days later, after this tweet, he was shot and killed in a protest. These are not random acts that are happening. The people, the public, the civilians who are protesting are being identified and eliminated quietly once the cameras are gone, which is part of the reason that the regime has been so determined to shut off the internet during this cause. Which brings me to the next story I want to talk about today. While Iranians are being killed on the ground, the Islamic Republic is running a coordinated influence operation that is abroad, that is designed to control how the world understands what's happening inside of Iran. They're trying to control the narrative, which is part of the reason that the internet has been off for almost 3 weeks. Now, the only people who have access to internet now, by and large, unless they've figured out a workaround, are people who have what's called white SIMs. The regime has granted a specific filtered internet to people who are inside the regime, which of course is presenting a skewed perspective and reality of what's actually happening on the ground inside Iran. Now, a company called Golden Owl did a research project to investigate some of these influence operations, and here is an update about what they found just this past week. Now, Golden Owl's investigation makes one thing clear right from the very start. This isn't an organic online debate happening. It's a structured, state-aligned information, or really disinformation operation that's operating at scale. It's primarily running on X, or at least that's what Golden Owl investigate, and it's aimed overwhelmingly at Western audiences rather than Iranians who are inside of the country. Now, Golden Owl analyzed thousands of accounts on X and identified a 2-tier network. At its core were several hundred originator accounts. These were responsible for repeating or creating, the narratives that the Islamic Republic wants to promote. And then surrounding them, there were thousands of amplifier accounts that would rapidly retweet or repost, like, comment, and push that same narrative, that same content into the coordinated waves of this disinformation campaign. Now, posting patterns were synchronized, repetitive, and even timed around key events, including, of course, protest escalations, reports of executions, international condemnation that the regime may have been facing at various points, as well as the discussion about sanctions. Now, one of the most damning findings that that Golden Owl found in this whole scenario is that issue of timing. So they documented that this network remained highly active even during internet shutdowns inside of Iran. So while ordinary Iranians couldn't post or live stream or communicate in any way whatsoever with the outside world, these accounts were still able to operate at full capacity. Now, this strongly suggests that the operation was either being run from outside of Iran or they had privileged access that wasn't available to ordinary citizens. Now, Golden Owl categorized the content that was being pushed by this network into clear categories, into clear buckets. So I'm going to take you through each one just so you understand what you're seeing when you see these kinds of claims being made in the media. First, there's the pro-regime and pro-IRGC propaganda. This is content that's praising the Islamic Republic leadership, that's glorifying the IRGC, while the protester deaths are denied or minimized or, in some cases, dismissed outright. The second category of content that we see is the delegitimization of the uprising itself. Protesters are being framed as violent or foreign-backed, chaotic, or somehow manipulated, with the goal of making the entire movement appear morally ambiguous and, politically dangerous. Now, the third category that we see are targeted attacks on opposition figures, particularly the supporters of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. We've seen countless smears and conspiracy theories and ridicule against both him and his supporters that have been used really for years, but in particular in the last few weeks to weaken the most unified Iranian opposition that we have seen in many years. And this is an attempt to divide the opposition that finally is standing united. Now, the fourth category is that opposition fragmentation specifically. We saw that accounts were amplifying separatist rhetoric, meaning people who were advocating for the division of Iran based on certain ethnic groups, or fringe ideological disputes and identity-based divisions. Now, the researchers who conducted this at Golden Owl were clear that this content was not meant to empower minorities or something like that, rather to fracture opposition unity and strengthen the Islamic Republic of Iran. And this is actually consistent with what we've seen from them for the past 47 years. The fifth category is anti-Western and even anti-Semitic messaging. This was a plethora of content that blamed Israel, Jews, and in some cases the United States for the unrest inside of Iran, deflecting attention away from the regime's violence at home. These are people who were tweeting at accounts like mine, saying awful, heinous things, sending death threats, all kind of hate speech like this. And then we have the sixth category, which is Western narrative targeting. Now, many of the accounts openly declared that their locations were in the US, UK, Germany, and Canada, even if they were on VPN, according to what those accounts say, which would confirm, again, that the primary audience of this influence operation were journalists or policymakers or activists of some kind, basically the Western public, not the Iranian public. And that's important to understand because you're not getting the true story when you're getting it from the Islamic regime. Now, the Golden Owl also identified several behavioral markers that were consistent with coordinated or semi-automated control, including unnatural posting frequency, recycled phrasing that appeared in thousands of tweets, as well as synchronized surges of content across time zones. Basically, what Golden Owl exposed is narrative warfare. There's physical repression at home against the Iranian people, paired with information cleanup that's happening abroad. So their goal is to kill the protester inside of Iran and then flood your timeline with false information about what's happening, all empowered by a complete internet shutdown in Tehran, and then dominating the conversation in London or Paris or Washington with their propagandists, including people like Trita Parsi, who are part of NIAC. Now, once again, this narrative laundering is happening in real time. This mass repression that we're seeing in Iran is being reframed by them as stability, and state violence is becoming law enforcement. Which brings me to my next story I want to talk about very briefly, but important to mention, the media on Iran. This has been an ongoing failure, very similar to what we see when it comes to Israel and their reporting, but one of the loudest criticisms right now is directed at the BBC, and deservedly so. Across social media and commentary, we've seen people asking why the massive protests in the case of London reported 100,000 people, as well as the mass killings inside of Iran and the prolonged internet shutdowns in Iran, are barely registering on the BBC's coverage. Viewers have shared screenshots from the front pages of BBC and broadcasts showing Iran completely absent, or I guess in some cases minimized. But on the BBC, there was nothing, while other global stories receive wall-to-wall attention, including, by the way, anything that happens in Gaza. Now, critics argue that difficulty accessing Iran is not really an excuse, and I would confirm that as a journalist, because outlets routinely use open source footage. Not only that, they could use footage from before. They don't need the actual footage to report what's happening in the news, which is what their job is. They can report witness testimonies, they can speak to other diaspora activists who are in touch with their families. And the concern that's being raised repeatedly is that caution has crossed into de facto self-censorship that ultimately is aiding the Islamic Republic of Iran itself. And then there's the issue of VOA Farsi, which is funded by U.S. taxpayers and something really important for the American public to understand. It's meant to provide uncensored information to Iranians. It's a critical tool for oppressive regimes that have limited access to information, like in Cuba or in Iran. But the journalists who have been working there, as well as others who have relations with them, have complained recently about the censorship of support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has been, in a way, systematically erased from any coverage since the new takeover. Now, chants, interviews, and statements that reflect the real popular support for the Crown Prince inside Iran are being actively downplayed or, in some cases, omitted by VOA Farsi. The head of VOA Farsi, Ali Javanmardi, has been widely criticized for his own separatist views, his own political views on Iranian political issues, and other Iranian journalists and diaspora media figures are speaking up. They're outraged that Kari Lake put this person into such a position and for allowing him to let his personal political views shape editorial decisions. Now, this concern has been raised with thousands of social media posts, just that I've seen alone. Yet instead of addressing those concerns, the leadership has closed ranks. Kari Lake, whether it's out of ignorance or malice, has defended Ali, despite growing backlash that VOA Farsi is no longer reflecting the voice of the Iranian people. In fact, it's censoring it. They've also recently decided to start removing all sound from any of the footage that's coming from the protests inside of Iran, simply in order to avoid the accusation that they are censoring support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. No one's buying that. It's not working. Kari Lake, do your job. And now let's talk about something that has been infuriating Iranians for many, many years. The regime officials living in luxury abroad, along with their families, of course. Now, in previous episodes, I've reported about Ali Ansari, but this week we learned just how extensive his network really is. An investigation in the Financial Times this week revealed that Ansari, who is an Iranian banker sanctioned by the UK for alleged ties to the IRGC, has built a European property empire worth around 400 million euros. Now, British authorities had already frozen his UK assets, including a London property portfolio that's valued at more than £150. You can check out that episode where I broke down exactly how he did that. But the new investigation from the Financial Times uncovered far more. His European assets include a luxury golf resort in Mallorca, a ski hotel in Austria, several high-end hotels in Frankfurt, and a major shopping center in Germany. All, of course, hidden behind offshore shell companies in jurisdictions like St. Kitts and Nevis or Luxembourg. Now, in cases like this, we may not know exactly where every single dollar comes from, but we do know that the regime uses their elites to create complex financial structures and offshore entities, and they use their family members to move money out of Iran to shield assets and to maintain access to Western financial systems in order to evade sanctions. We recently saw this dynamic on full display with the lavish wedding of Ali Shamkhani's daughter in the United States. Well, now attention has returned to the Larijani family, one of the most powerful dynasties within the Islamic Republic's system. In the United States, there's Fatima Larijani, who until last week was employed at Emory University. She was fired following public exposure and backlash, which was the right step, but it shouldn't end there. This is someone who never should have been admitted into the United States in the first place. Deportation needs to happen. But let's look over at the UK. In the UK, there's Hadi Larijani, who lives openly and works as a professor of philosophy at one of the universities there in Scotland, holding academic positions while his family has been deeply embedded in Iran's judiciary and political power structure. Beyond that, another relative of Larijani is listed as an officer of the company Pill Sorted, holding British nationality. Why do the children of regime officials have British, or in some cases Canadian, or in some cases American citizenship? Now, it's true, we don't know the full origin of every dollar that flows through these companies, but we do know how the regime works, and we know that regime elites rely on those family members. They rely on foreign residency, on foreign citizenship, as well as those Western legal systems to protect the wealth that they extracted, and when I say extracted, I mean stole, from Iran, while ordinary Iranians continue to pay the price. That's why calls are continuing to grow to investigate these networks, to freeze assets where appropriate, to expel the ambassadors and the diplomats of the Islamic Republic, to revoke visas that are tied to sanctioned or corrupt regimes, and to hold this regime accountable. This isn't ordinary migration or immigration that we're talking about. We're talking about the intentional laundering of regime power into Western systems. And last but not least, we have our final story of the day. After 843 days, the last hostage, Ron Gvili, has been brought home. With his return for the first time in 12 years, there are no Israeli hostages left in Gaza. And wow, I have waited a long time to say that sentence. Ron was a soldier. He was the first one in to save people. He was the last one out. He was killed on the 7th, and his body was held for years as a bargaining chip by terrorists, sponsored by the Islamic Republic. His family waited painfully for nearly 2.5 years to bring him home for a proper burial. Now, Ron's return was delayed because Hamas claimed that they didn't know the whereabouts of his body. This is something that Israel completely rejected, and it turns out they were right. Terrorist organizations will always negotiate in bad faith and weaponize the good faith of those who have to negotiate with them against them. Well, that's it for Axis of Truth this week. I'll be back next week with more updates, more interviews, and more stories from the Middle East.
We are here with the one and only Erin Molan. Thank you so much for being here.
Libby, it is so amazing to be here with you and back on ILTV. I'm so excited. This conference is insane.
What are you doing here?
So I came to host the first night, which was amazing. Got to interview Steve Witkoff up on stage, which was phenomenal.
How was it?
Came to support. It was great. Look, a lot of it was focused on Iran for obvious reasons, and I think what people need to remember is he's not going to be able to tell me anything that is considered intel, anything that could give away what they're planning on doing. So it was really interesting, but we didn't get a lot of answers. But I kind of like that because President Donald Trump works in that way, in that before the 12-day war started, President Trump said, I'll give the Iranian regime 2 weeks. 2 days later, Israel went in. So I think people need to have faith and stay strong in that aspect. The other thing we talked about, of course, was the hostages, and he was phenomenal. I could see tears in his eyes. He feels this very deeply. He spoke about President Donald Trump crying in the White House when the hostages were returned and saying to Steve Witkoff, this is the greatest day I've ever had in the White House, which should give comfort to Israelis and Jews everywhere that Donald Trump values this relationship. It's been phenomenal. The energy is incredible. People are crazy. There's like a singles event here as well. I was looking at that online. I did not go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Did you go?
To where?
To the singles event.
No.
You're here working. Very professional.
Wait, what do you think will happen in Iran?
Great question. Look, I am not a fan of doing any kind of deal. I don't think you can do deals with a terrorist regime. And diplomacy is a wonderful thing when it's not a terrorist regime that takes joy in killing its people and the rest of the world. I say no deals. I say no negotiations. I want the US to go in and destroy this regime. I think the people have shown how courageous and brave they are. They're fighting for their lives. And I think for people in America who say America first, destroying this regime is America first. They have the blood of Americans on their hands. They had a bounty out on President Trump. Whether or not they will, I don't know. I look at military infrastructure that's moving towards the region from the US. I know there's a lot of rhetoric saying things have calmed down, and Steve Witkoff said on stage last night that diplomacy is the answer and the key. But these terrorists don't understand diplomacy.
Yeah.
They don't speak the language of diplomacy. So I think nobody wins if they stay in power, and there have been thousands upon thousands of lives that have been lost over the last 2 weeks. We cannot let that be in vain.
Do you think the regime will fall? I think we have a great opportunity. It's now or never.
It's now or never. It's now or never. And I thought during the 12-day war, I thought that was an opportunity. This is the next opportunity. It has never been weaker. All they care about is destroying everyone and anything that doesn't believe what they do. It is a danger to us all. The world benefits immensely if it falls. I worry now that people have lost faith in what the outside world might be able to do to help them. They've shown us what they're capable of. They've shown us they're willing to die for this cause. We can't let them down. We cannot let them down.
I agree. I want to take you 2 years back to October 7. How do you sum up all these 2 years that you stood with the Jewish people, you stood with Israel? How do you sum up these 2 years? Incredible years.
It's a great question, and you know what? They are, despite...
For you, I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I look at what occurred, and an absolute tragedy, absolutely. And there's a lot of focus when it comes to my story on the price that I've paid to speak up and to stand alongside Israel, which is the most obvious thing in the world to me, to fight terror and stand alongside a democratic nation who only wants peace.
Yeah.
And that's true. They only want peace. But I have gained so much. I have gained so much. And I think it's a nice reminder to everyone out there. In the short term, yes, you may pay a price, but to go to bed every night, shut your eyes and know that you're on the right side of history, to know that you stood for what mattered in a world that is constantly encouraging you to do the opposite, has been incredibly special for me. I've been introduced to this entire new world. I travel the world and I fight for what I believe in, and I fight for a future for my daughter. And yes, there are absolutely hard parts to it. Every day there are challenges, but there are challenges everywhere. Choose your hard. Yeah. I choose this hard because it might actually make the world a safer place rather than the other hard.
We see right now we see a rise in anti-Semitism also in Australia. We see what happened in Bondi Beach. What do you think about what happened?
It was horrific, but it certainly wasn't a surprise. I think anyone who's actually, absolutely, if you paid attention over the past 2 years in Australia, and you look at what happened at the Opera House straight after October 7, 2 days later, before an IDF boot had hit the ground, we had people chanting, "Gas the Jews, F the Jews, where are the Jews?" Whatever it was a hunt, and it was a celebration of a massacre. And we allowed that to occur in front of one of our beautiful icons. Nobody paid a price for what is hate speech. That is illegal in Australia. That is threatening. I then look at the Opera, the Harbour Bridge, and I look at people marching, holding up posters of Khamenei, a terrorist leader, waving ISIS flags. I mean, nothing happened. People praised it.
Where is the Prime Minister?
Well, where is he? I tell you what, he's there recognizing a Palestinian state. He's there recognizing a Palestinian state. That's where he is. And sorry, that rewarded October 7.
Right.
That is not the way to go about it. Every decision the government has made has been appalling, in my opinion, in this space. And they have demonized and they've legitimized hate against the Jewish community in Australia. And they can say all they want now, or we did this or we did that. No, you did not do enough to protect your own people and people that contributed to Australia in the most incredible way. So when 2 Islamic extremists opened fire on a bridge at Bondi Beach and killed Jews like animals, and not just Jews, and this is the point I make to people in the West, you might think, oh, but I'm not Jewish, so I'm okay. That's not how they work. They don't check. They might go and target a Jewish event, but they don't check to see specifically, are you Jewish? They want to kill and destroy everything and anyone. And I don't think anyone who's been paying attention was surprised that that occurred. They were shocked. It was shocking. It was not surprising.
Do you think the Jewish community right now in Australia is afraid?
Absolutely. They've been afraid for 2 years. Afraid, but you look, synagogue firebombed in Melbourne. I mean, houses set alight, cars blown up, graffiti outside Jewish kids' schools, the most horrific things said. Jews have not felt safe in Australia since October 7, and that is a failing on us as a country.
Two last question. What's your next goal?
My next goal, great question. My next goal, it's to continue to grow and to continue to build an audience, not because that's something that we always want, but because I think what I say matters. And that might sound arrogant, but I have to believe in what I say, and I have to believe in the importance of what I say, or what's the point? So I believe the more people who listen to me, the more people who watch me, the better the world will be. And yes, you can all attack me now and disagree.
No.
I don't care. I believe
Erin,
absolutely.
I love you too much for that.
I believe absolutely in that. And I also think, peace. I've this year it's so crazy. I've never had as many death threats. I've never been in as many situations that have been threatening. Yet I've never felt as much peace inside. And that, to me, I want to continue to do that. I want to continue to focus on what matters. And I'm a mum. First and foremost, I am a mum, and I get to now lead this blessed existence where I've never worked harder, but I control the hours that I do, and I do it from home, and I walk her to school every morning, and I pick her up every afternoon. And she doesn't quite understand what her mummy does yet, but I think she knows it's something a little bit special, and I want to continue to just be the best mum that I can be.
She's our future.
She is fire, and she will absolutely either run the world or commit a heinous crime. I haven't decided yet. I hope she'll run the world.
What message would you like to send to the Jewish people around the world now?
What another great question. I would say be so proud of who you are, despite so many in the world trying to shame you and trying to rewrite your story and trying to control the narrative. What they don't have is the truth. And there's no different versions of the truth. There's not your truth or my truth or their truth. There is the truth. And Israel is not perfect. The Jewish community is not perfect. But my God, in my eyes, they're fairly close to it in regards to, at their core, who they are. And I would say be immensely proud of that and continue to encourage your children to be immensely proud of that, because that is how you survive, that is how you grow, that is how you flourish. You instill pride in your children. And I think that is my message, because that's where it starts, at home.
Erin, thank you so much for this interview. You're the best. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Aussie. I love you, Libby. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. Amid a buildup of U.S. forces in the region, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Boyd Cooper meets in Israel with IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir to coordinate ahead of a possible strike against the Iranian regime. Iranian officials threaten all-out war if attacked. Zamir says the IDF is ready to strike back if attacked. The IDF recovers the remains of Master Sergeant Ron Gvili, killed during the October 7th attack, and the last remaining Israeli hostage held in Gaza. Acting on an intelligence tip, the IDF discovered him buried in a Muslim cemetery after doing forensic tests on over 200 bodies exhumed from the site. Israel agrees to the reopening of the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt after the recovery of Ron Gvili's body. As phase 2 of the U.S. peace agreement advances, clashes continue in Gaza between Israeli forces and terrorist infiltrators, and the IDF demolishes terrorist infrastructure in the Strip, including a 4-kilometer-long terror tunnel. In a series of airstrikes across South Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley, the IDF destroys Hezbollah weapons storage and production facilities and terrorist infrastructure built in violation of the agreement between Israel and the Lebanese governments. The IDF also eliminates 2 Hezbollah terrorists, Muhammad Mamad al-Husseini, the organization's artillery chief in Arazan village, and Jihad Bassam, responsible for weapons production in Bir al-Sanasir. And now, our big story. With the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln and its strike group now in Mideast waters, the U.S. military can be said to be locked and loaded for a potential operation against the Iranian regime. Israel, too, is preparing itself for possible retaliation if that happens. Still, President Trump this week offered the regime, if not an olive branch, certainly an off-ramp from confrontation, saying he's still willing to negotiate, a strategy some of his key advisors are said to favor. But the Tehran regime, at least publicly, remains defiant. As the estimated death toll among the protesters gunned down on the streets continues to rise in the tens of thousands, the Ayatollah security forces are dragging the wounded out of hospital beds for retribution. And Iranian officials say they are ready to respond if Trump finally pulls the trigger.
در مورد اینکه ما چگونه واکنش نشون خواهیم داد خیلی روشن هست. ما همونطور که قبلا هم نشون دادیم در برابر هر تعرضی، در برابر هر تهدیدی به صورت قاطع و با تمام توان و فراگیر حتما پاسخ خواهیم داد. در مورد جزئیاتش قاعدتاً نه اینجا جاش هست و نه وظیفه تخصص بنده است که صحبت کنم. نیروهای مسلح ما به خوبی یاد گرفتند که چگونه از حریم ایران دفاع بکنند. جمهوری اسلامی ایران هم نسبت به توانمندی‌های خودش اطمینان داره، هم تجربه‌های قبلی از جمله تجربه نبرد قهرمانانه خرداد ماه رو در ذهن داره. توانمندتر از هر زمانی قطعاً به هر گونه تعرضی پاسخی فراگیر و پشیمان کننده خواهد داد.
And joining us in studio for more is Iran and Middle East expert Catherine Perez-Shakdam, and also executive director for We Believe in Israel, and Ambassador Danny Ayalon, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., now chairman of the Silver Road Capital Group. Catherine, let me start with you. The forces are in place. What do the Iranian people expect now from the U.S., hope for, and realistically, what do you think is going to take place?
Iranians are waiting for President Trump to act. They need him to act. They have been dying in the streets. Children are being shot dead in the streets of Tehran and across the country. This is not sustainable. People need help. They are crying out for freedom. President Trump say locked and loaded. We're waiting.
Right. And Ambassador Ayalon, Danny, President Trump, we know he will not hesitate to use action, but he also does like to negotiate, perhaps prefers it. Reports coming out just now of maybe some sort of, I'd say, secret talks or talks that Israel, for example, is not even part of or being necessarily updated on. What's your sense of whether it's going to be shooting or talking here?
Yeah. Well, Kalev, there are 3 good reasons for Trump to, make good on his threats. First of all, his own reputation and keeping up United States deterrence. Secondly, he locked himself into specific threats repeatedly. So if he backs down now, that is going to be very bad, not just for the United States, but its allies. And all those evil forces can come out of the woodwork, whether it's ISIS, whether it's Al-Qaeda in Iraq, anywhere else. And I think also something which is very important is the scope of the carnage, which is just now is being discovered day by day. Also, another good reason for him to do it is not just the expectation, rightly so, of the Iranian people, is to exact a price from the Ayatollah's regime. With the scope of the carnage, if there is no action, kinetic, serious military action by the United States, that is, we invite the next carnage very soon. So I think this, if I have to assume or assess right now, the chances for a military action outweigh not doing anything unless, Kalev, and this is very, very important, unless, and we know that feverishly Iran is trying to negotiate, but we should not, or Trump should not repeat the mistake of Obama in 2015. That means if there is negotiation, absolutely on American terms, and that is total capitulations, no more enrichment of uranium on Iranian soil, dismantling the missiles systems, and of course, no helping and assisting the proxies of Iran throughout the Middle East and the world.
Right. And Catherine, you know the regime better than most. Is there that kind of flexibility? We know there's public defiance, but from the Ayatollah and others, is there any kind of flexibility of the type that Danny's talking about?
No, look, this regime needs to go. It has to go. It's an abomination unto the world. They have committed crimes against humanity. Let's remember this. Not just against our people, the Jewish people in Israel, but the rest of the world too. Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iranians themselves. Now, the notion that we would want to negotiate with evil, I disagree. Look, if we don't do it now, if we don't cut the head of the Hydra, we're going to have the same conversation in 20 years, 50 years. It's going to get worse.
Right. But the head of the Hydra, I mean, a lot of talk about whatever the action the U.S. takes, would it be enough to topple the regime, even if it took out the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei? What's your assessment?
Not enough. I mean, of course, he has to go because he represents the top of the pyramid. But he's sustained by a system, the RSJC. They need to go. You need to cut off at least enough of the top of the pyramid that the middle will literally collapse. A lot of the people, by the nature of the regime, the way it's architected, are not there because they believe in the ideologies, because they've been locked into it. And I refer quite often to a form of enslavement, that of the mind and the body. 90 million people find themselves colonized by an ideology that is not their own and a faith that doesn't resemble their own. That's important to understand. Now, if we want to be thorough, and we need to be thorough, we're going to have to address the issue of Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood. Both Sunni radicalism and Shia radicalism walk hand in hand, and they have told us to tell that they are two separate entities when they don't connect at the very top. They do. They work together. I give you Hamas.
Yeah, well, let's leave Hamas let's leave that because we're going to get to Gaza in a bit. But Danny, if we're looking at the kind of thorough operation Catherine is talking about, of course, Israel is going to get pulled into that, even if it doesn't want to. It's certainly Iran is going to target Israel. Is the country ready for that kind of potentially sustained conflict over a period of time, if it means the possibility of toppling the regime or certainly weakening it to the point that it's not an existential threat?
Yes, if indeed this regime will, put everything out, and they feel now an existential threat, and rightly so, they will engage the entire Middle East, and they are threatening not only on Israel but also on other American allies, be it the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, and this is where this other political factor that weighs in, because of the threats of Iran, we see a major diplomatic effort led by Qatar, which is an ally of Iran, unfortunately, to dissuade the American from a military operation, claiming that this would bring a chaos not only to the region but to the entire world. The destruction of all the oil facilities, which means oil prices are going to jack sky high, and a lot of casualties around the world, of course, blocking the Hormuz waterway and many other things. But this is where leadership is needed. With all due respect to all the threats from Iran, which are being embellished and being promoted by those countries, mainly Qatar, I believe that once an operation is starting, then the capabilities of the United States in terms of intelligence, electronic warfare, and of course all the other facilities and capabilities that they have, including, of course, what Israel has, I don't think that they will have any chance for Iranians to really wreak too much havoc in the region.
Right. And Catherine, if you, for example, the top and even the middle leadership of the Ayatollah's regime were taken out, the question is if in those lower levels, in the military level, outside of, for example, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, there are people, Iranians, that are going to be willing to aid the popular uprising. There's a lot of question about it. Is that potential there?
Yes. So the military that you're referring to, called Artesh, is actually, historically speaking, a great supporter of the monarchy. So they're actually the reason why they don't have many weapons, because the regime doesn't trust the military, because the military could betray. I would expect that they would. A lot of people have defected. They can't do this openly for very obvious reasons. The regime comes after you and comes after you hard. So it's not just you. It's going to be your children, and they literally go through your entire family tree. It's a horrible abomination of a regime. We have to free Iranians from them. We have, for the sake of us, for the sake of our Western democracies. Let's remember that they have threatened President Trump's life about 5 times now. They have attempted to kill him several times, or so they claim. They're also threatening the West. I mean, they're literally infiltrating us. They are destroying Western society from the inside. They have captured our universities, which means that, can you imagine, those kids will grow up and will be the next generation of leaders.
Right.
I don't feel like living under a mullah anytime soon. I don't know about you, but no.
Right. And certainly the people of Iran have had enough. Catherine, please stay with us. Ambassador Ayalon, I want to move to another pressing issue, but one that certainly has connections to what we've been discussing. Now, the return of Master Sergeant Ron Gvili's body back to Israel from Gaza this week provided badly needed closure for his family and Israel as a whole. Killed in action fighting Hamas terrorists in the October 7th attack, Gvili was the last Israeli hostage held in Gaza, ending a painful chapter in this nation's history. But his return paves the way for a new chapter in Gaza's history, the start of Phase 2 of the U.S. brokered peace agreement, beginning with this week's reopening of the Rafah crossing on the Sinai border. For the Netanyahu government, this phase poses big questions and challenges. Will Hamas agree to disarm? What will be the role of the new international security force taking its place? And will the Palestinian Authority be given a governance role in Gaza over Israeli objections? Here's what Prime Minister had to say addressing some of these issues.
אני שומע גם עכשיו את האמירות שנאפשר את שיקום עזה לפני הפירוז. זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שנכניס חיילים טורקים וחיילים קטרים לעזה. גם זה לא יקרה. אני שומע שאני אאפשר הקמת מדינה פלסטינית בעזה. זה לא קרה וזה לא יקרה.
Danny, Prime Minister Netanyahu the other night setting some red lines, but there's a lot of pressure from the Trump administration to which he and Israel owes a lot. Some have said some of those red lines have already shifted a bit. There's talk about partial demilitarization for partial reconstruction. I want to get your reaction to how firm the Prime Minister is going to be able to be in the coming weeks on these issues.
Yes, I think a lot will depend, of course, on the trust that he has with the president. President Trump is the one that will make the decision. Although, under him, there are 2 camps, I would say, within the administration. One is, I would say, the economics one, which is led by Jared Kushner and Witkoff. They would like to move forward as fast as possible with the reconstruction. Also for obvious economic gains. On the other hand, you have the strategists led by Rubio, which is the Secretary of State, which they look at the long term and they look also at the strategic picture, and they believe that it has to be done in a very judicious way. No more the mistakes of the past, where we look the other way when terrorists are cheating or are getting more munitions and strengthening their arms. So here it must be very, very well understood that there is no reconstruction without the demilitarization of Gaza. And I would say more than that, we need to look at the de-radicalization of Gaza as well. And this is something which is for the sustainable future. That means we need in Gaza a new curriculum system for the schools, changing of the imams' calls in the mosques, the media incitement, Hamas media incitement. All this has to change if we really want to see a prosperous Gaza on the one hand and a safe Israel on the other.
And Catherine, coming back to your comment now about the influence of Qatar in, for example, Gaza with Hamas, and let's also remember Turkey reports that they're pressing to have Hamas terrorists be incorporated into a new Gaza police force, and we know there are links between the Trump administration and Qatar, and President Trump has spoken warmly about Qatar and the Turkish leader, President Erdogan.
Well, I think he likes the money that Qatar can provide, which is fair enough. Now, we need to understand and remember, Hamas can never have a gun. Never, ever again. We know what they do when they have those guns. So no thank you. Also, if you want, and I completely agree with Danny, what we need to do is to go one step further to cut off the money, take off the guns, cut off the money, re-educate people within, and make sure that religion and their mosque are not vehicles for terror. And for that, I'd like to invite people in the Muslim world to actually stand up for their religion and their faith that have been demonized by those people they call radicals, saying, oh, it's not us. Okay, but if you don't do anything about it and against them, then it's very difficult for us standing here to know the difference. How can I tell? They need to speak up. So it's not just about Israel and America to do the work. They need to do the work for themselves and decide that, do you want to live under Hamas forever and have nothing and have a miserable life, or do you want to actually breathe free and use the thing between your ear called the brain and think for yourself and exercise critical thinking?
All right. And then I want to ask you about a role of another country, Egypt, because starting this week, it's going to play a major role, for example, in policing its part of the Rafah crossing. Certainly, Egypt is on a different country from Qatar and Turkey, but it's certainly a country that sometimes Israel has found itself difficult to work with.
Yes, it's a very complex relationship. Of course, the national interest of Egypt and Israel very much converge or intertwine when it comes to Hamas or the Brotherhood, the Islamic Brotherhood, which Hamas is part of, and they are the Brotherhood is the most, I would say, existential threat to the al-Sisi regime and to Egypt as a whole. So in that respect, there is a great cooperation, mostly on intelligence and under the radar. But at the same time, Sisi has to heed to the pressure from the public in Egypt and the sentiments that are pro-Palestinians. So in that respect, I think that he would walk a very fine line. On the one hand, try to help the humanitarian situation as much as he can in Gaza, by opening the Rafah and insisting on the opening of the Rafah crossing. Right. But at the other hand, he will not allow the Brotherhood and Hamas to really rise up. And for that, he needs Israel cooperation and collaboration.
All right. Well, certainly going to be some interesting days ahead for Israel and for the entire region. I want to thank Ambassador Danny Ayalon and Catherine Paris-Shakdan for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now a final word. With all that is going on with Iran and Gaza, perhaps not enough attention is being paid to another key security front for Israel, its shared border in the north with Syria. Last week, the former National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, penned an opinion piece for Ynet titled, "Why Israel Should Put Syria First," arguing that the government should make reaching a security agreement with the Damascus regime a diplomatic priority, even as it contends with other pressing developments. Drawing on his own experiences conducting intimate dialogues with senior Syrian officials, Hanegbi said he found a pragmatic willingness to reach compromises on some of the areas of disagreement still between the countries, and even more importantly, a deep and genuine hostility towards Iran and Hezbollah that would make Syria an invaluable ally for Israel in combating the malevolent Tehran regime and its terror proxies. Now, this comes amid optimism toward a renewal of direct negotiations between Israeli and Syrian officials, expected to begin shortly under the mediation of the U.S. envoy Tom Barak, with some reports even suggesting the possibility of a deal that could reach beyond security arrangements to encompass full diplomatic recognition and even Syria's inclusion in the Abraham Accords. But to be sure, some formidable challenges remain. Israel's biggest concern is maintaining security along the Golan and Mount Hermon frontier, ensuring that southwest Syria does not become a launching pad for Islamist elements still there to launch attacks both across the border and on the local Syrian Jewish communities. For Israel to withdraw from its forward positions in Syria, it will need strict guarantees and possibly full demilitarization of the region. From President Ahmed al-Shara. Now, given his own Islamic terrorist background, many in Israel still do not trust al-Shara. But a good test of his intentions will become evident in the coming weeks of how he handles the situation of the Kurds in northern Syria, whether his government can successfully reintegrate the remaining Kurdish forces into the Syrian army with minimal violence while maintaining the civil and religious rights of Kurdish civilians within the body politic. And as for Israel's long-standing territorial dispute with Syria over the Golan, that is an issue that can likely be delayed indefinitely through symbolic gestures while Israel maintains full sovereignty over the region that was fully recognized by the prior Trump administration. Now, the talks between Israel and Syria are being held in parallel with ongoing negotiations between Israel and Lebanon, also being mediated by the U.S. envoy Tom Barak. But those discussions are likely to yield little fruit as long as a fully armed Hezbollah, controlled by a long-standing Iranian regime, still continues to intimidate a cowed Lebanese government. Elsewhere on the diplomatic front, the dream of a breakthrough in Israel's relations with Saudi Arabia seems more dependent than ever on developments in Gaza on the Palestinian issue, which at this point seem years or even decades away. But the creation and strengthening of Israel's ties with Syria could prove to be an impetus in improving those situations by weakening Iran and Hezbollah's hold on Lebanon and showing the Saudis that Arab nations need not be held hostage by progress on the Palestinian issue to advance their own political and security interests. Reaching a deal with Damascus and even with the ex-jihadist al-Shara may require a leap of faith on the part of policymakers in Jerusalem, backed by both concrete security arrangements and ironclad geopolitical commitments. But a chance to finally secure Israel's Golan border and bring Syria into its regional alliances is a once-in-a-several-generations opportunity that is still worth taking. Thank you for joining ILTV Security.
The story of the Jewish people has never been about standing still. It's a story of moving forward, of taking responsibility, of protecting what matters, no matter the challenge. That story is still being written today, not with swords, but with stewardship of the land, with the rule of law, and with the determination to secure Israel's future. And on the front lines of that mission stands Regavim. Regavim is a public movement dedicated to defending Israel's national lands and natural resources in the field, in the courts, and in the public square. Through research, on-the-ground action, and legal advocacy, Regavim works to uphold the rule of law and to ensure that Israel can grow, thrive, and remain rooted in its homeland.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from the region. The possibility of a U.S. strike against Iran is moving dangerously closer. Trump says Tehran wants to negotiate, but has also given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal he considers as fair and just, including a deal in which the regime gives up its nuclear weapons. This is the goal for Donald Trump, and according to the American president, failure to agree to a deal will lead to military action. Have a listen to some of Trump's latest remarks.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only
military
they
action?
know for sure.
Have you communicated that to them
Yeah,
directly?
I have.
You could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons. It said they should do that, but I don't know that they will. But they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
Trump added that an armada is on its way to Iran. A U.S.-guided missile destroyer was seen this morning off the southern port of Eilat. As additional naval and air assets move into the region, all this signals that Washington is positioning for rapid action should the ongoing talks collapse. But the regime, they're threatening back. Ayatollah Khamenei said this morning that if the United States were to open a war front against Iran, the escalation would be regional. As speculation grows, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir visited Washington this weekend to hold high talks with top U.S. officials on what comes next. And moving on to Gaza, where, as promised, the Rafah crossing is opening today, symbolizing the official transformation into Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire plan. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip as Israel and Egypt work to ensure the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapons smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, medical patients, dual citizens, and others will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. With the NCAG, or the technocratic Palestinian body set to govern Gaza and replace Hamas, still with no official entry date, Rafah will be open and Hamas will still be in charge. All of this unfolds in the southern Gaza Strip as the IDF releases footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched for hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons hidden inside. This after a weekend development that saw 32 Palestinians killed in IDF airstrikes targeting Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah, according to the army. 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. And today, the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona, Israel's northernmost city, has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from October 8, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when a U.S. brokered ceasefire was signed. Today, Netanyahu announced that a university will be built in the city in an effort to attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated to return home. And finally, Israel is facing an unprecedented heat wave in the middle of January. A dust storm from North Africa has entered the region, causing unusually hot weather in this winter month. Strong winds are set to pick up, and the meteorological services say dry southern air will push temperatures up to around 25 degrees in the mountains and nearly 30 degrees in the coastal plain and the northern Negev, levels not seen in Israel since 1987. And before we go, I want to remind you to scan the QR code that's on your screen to get access to our ILTV WhatsApp channel for all of the latest updates and breaking stories. But for now, that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the hour. I'm Diva Klein, and thank you so much for watching and for joining today.
Washington now has the smoking gun. The Islamic Republic didn't back down. They killed more. Israeli intelligence says executions surged with over 30,000 dead. And at Davos, Trump says the Gaza war is basically over. But Kushner admits Hamas could still be standing. Is this the new Gaza or the same old rubbish? We are unpacking it all only on JNS, only on the Quad. Welcome back, everybody, to the Quad from our Jerusalem studios with my wonderful co-host, Shoshana Keats-Jaskol, founder of Chokhmat Nashim, Elevating Orthodox Women's Voices, Bellamy Bellucci, activist and dancer and singer and model, all of that. And our wonderful Ruthie Bloom, who comes every time we ask her to. Ruthie Bloom, senior contributing editor here in JNS and a veteran journalist for many, many years. Welcome, ladies. What is going on this week and every week? It feels to me that every Thursday night, or maybe Wednesday night, we're going to bed thinking, maybe tonight's the night. Maybe tonight's the night. Maybe this is the night when the United States are going to bring down the Islamic regime and the people of Iran can finally be free. And every night, the Israeli public is ready for it. Yeah. Where, you know, we've got our shelters ready because we know that the backlash could come on us. And as we all know, the attack, or the so-called attack that was going to happen, was stopped because Trump got some message saying the executions have stopped. And yet, what we see is more carnage, more massacres, and now the Israeli intelligence has revealed that, in fact, the executions have actually accelerated. They haven't slowed down. They're killing women. They're killing children. That the supreme leader, Khamenei, has given an order to just kill. Watch this.
مریم اصلا یه چیزی بهت بگم باورت نمیشه. یکی از بچه ها میگفت تو سردخونه صدای ناله میاد، حتی باز نمیکنن. معلوم نیست اون زیر بچه ها چجوری دارن بال میزن. میگه صدای ناله میاد، حتی باز نمیکنن رسیدگی کنن. ببین چقدر جوونمون تیر خوردن ولی همونجوری ول کردن اونجا. اصلا مریم نمیدونم چجوری صدامو به کجا برسونم. حالمون خیلی بده. جوونای دست گلمون اونجا. اصلا ببین من پی همه چیو زدم به تنم رصدم کنن. هر گویی میخوام بخورم. مگه میشه؟ مگه داریم اینقدر ظلم؟
I mean, this is what's happening. People are being put into body bags that are alive. They're being shot from outside the body bags. They don't care if they're alive or dead. And meanwhile, the world is silent. Iran International and Time magazine are saying that the deaths could be up to 36,000. I think it could possibly be much more. And there may be use of chemical weapons. Of course, we know grenades, children being killed. It seems like nobody cares. I was at a rally on Saturday night here in Israel, and it was only Iranian Israelis. Like, where is everyone? Ruthie, you know, you're somebody who's been talking about Iran for years. Does this surprise you that the world's gone to sleep while these people are being massacred in the street? And do you actually think that America is going to step up and attack? What do you think?
Okay, I'll tell you what surprises me. It surprises me that it's been more than 2 weeks since President Trump said, keep going to the Iranians, keep going, help is on the way. And they risked their lives. They're dying all over the place. They're being slaughtered, blinded. This we also know from reports. Despite the closure of the internet, there are, you know, here and there the internet comes back on through Starlink, and we have a lot of information. And I want to tell you what is just really shocking in this day and age. It's one thing we used to say about the Holocaust, and I'm bringing the Holocaust up because today is the 26th of January. Tomorrow is Holocaust Remembrance Day. And though I really hate to compare anything to the Holocaust, here we have something unfolding under our very eyes, unlike during the Holocaust, when we didn't have social media, and even a newspaper, it would take it 24 hours to even go to print, and there was very little news coming out of there. We know what's going on, and still nothing is happening. Now, part of that is because we have all kinds of anonymous officials telling the New York Times, or not telling the New York Times, who knows, because the New York Times lies also, that this is because Israel requested of the U.S. administration to hold off on the strike because we're not ready. You mentioned that Israelis are all ready. Yes, we go to bed at night and we all make there's a lot of black humor. Are you know, put your shoes next to the bed, blah, 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 and we make jokes about it, or is it happening tonight? But the fact is Israel not ready in terms of the ability to intercept the missiles? I don't know. We hear contradictory reports, and I think it's awful. It has to be done soon, yesterday.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And like you say, this is a massacre unfolding, Holocaust unfolding. Then you had a fake genocide that they trumped up in Gaza that didn't exist. And then the real one, and nobody cares. Although last night in London, there was 100,000 people on the streets. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe people are beginning to care, Shoshana?
I think it's very simple. It's not an issue of caring. I think people care about what they want to care about when it suits their agenda, right? So you have the Syrian army literally raping and slaughtering Kurdish women, ripping off their hair. And I have a visceral reaction to disembodied hair. I went to Auschwitz, and we're a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. And when you see that disembodied hair, for me, I can't even look when people donate their hair.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me. And these videos of these fighters, terrorists, monsters, barbarians, holding up braids, you know what they've done to these women. We see there's videos of them slitting their throats, beating. It's horrifying. And where is anyone? Where is anyone? So you're talking about slaughter of people in Iran.
Yeah.
And you could say, oh, you didn't see the videos. But you didn't see the videos of them beating on Kurdish women. It's a lie. It's a lie. They don't care because it doesn't suit their agenda, and because, frankly, they would have to admit that the problems in the Middle East are not because of Israel.
Yeah. I think that's...
It's a whole stack of cards.
I think that's the main thing, that they would have to change the fact that the Islamists are the oppressors. Yeah, Boker Tov, surprise, surprise, they are the oppressors everywhere.
That's the common thread with
in Kurdistan, Syria, in Iran. That is what the world is still not prepared to admit. Their streets are being taken over. In America, the Islamists and the mindset is pillaging states, and yet nobody is actually connecting the dots, or they don't want to.
They don't want to. And I heard, by the way, not to just, maybe it's true that Israel isn't ready, but I've also heard that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are pressuring Trump not to strike.
Saudi Arabia especially.
Not to strike because they don't want an independent Iran. They don't want regime change. They don't want their people to see that, oh, maybe we could also be a democracy. So I would be careful before blaming just Israel, because Qatar, who gave Trump the plane? Remind me who gave Trump an airplane? Remind me who's got billions of dollars invested in the United States of America and the UK? Remind me.
The world, I think, is not just about freedom. I think with Saudi, it's about oil. If you have a free Iran, they've got billions and billions of dollars in crude oil, then oil might go down. Oil might go down, and that might affect Saudis. Bellamy, you are exposed to hypocrisy every single day, especially when you lived in New York. Does it surprise you?
No, not at all. I'm not surprised at all. What I think is more telling is that a real genocide, as you said, that word, the term genocide, the regime is currently performing a genocide on its own people. Its own people. It's not coming from the outside. The call is coming from within.
Yeah.
And when we look at what happened with Hamas, and we try to explain to the world, listen, they're a terrorist entity that was voted in, allegedly, if we want to say that, it's a democracy.
They voted once.
Voted in and ushered in a system that is constantly going to work against them, right? So you look at the internet blackout, their main goal, that's just a starting point. What they actually want is not just to isolate Iran and the people completely from the outside. They're going at it full on North Korea style. You don't see anything from there. You will get nothing from the outside, because that's the only way that they're actually going to keep control. So when you have to explain this to somebody that's already so brainwashed, sitting on the Upper East Side with their blue hair at Columbia University saying, Antifada revolution, it goes right past them, because they've been sold on a narrative that has been at work for so long.
Yeah.
That this whole regime and this jihadi mentality and everything. The best thing about this is that you don't have to do anything. You don't even have to assimilate. You just have to go to the West. Live your life as it is. And when it's time for you to be activated, you will be activated. And we're seeing it happen everywhere around the world. And the scariest part is Americans did not heed the warning before.
Well, they didn't look at Europe and see what's going on. I mean, Trump, to be fair, is saying we don't want to become Europe. I just want to say one more thing about the Iranian massacre, is that the reports are that that Iranian IRGC or soldiers are actually feeling a little bad about killing their compatriots, and so they're importing
mercenaries,
mercenaries, Iraqi Shias, and other mercenaries to kill Iranians because maybe somebody grew a conscience and they don't want to massacre their own people. This is horrific.
I saw a little.
This is horrific. This is a Holocaust, like you're saying, Ruthie.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, something else. You mentioned Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Here's the big problem. Trump is problematic because on the one hand, he's really the best friend Israel's ever had in the White House, and not just Israel, his whole Board of Peace, and I hate that title, by the way, because peace is really, I'll believe it when I see it. When I always say when apples grow on cherry trees. But having said that, he is trying to replace or have a separate UN, which is also very important. He's doing very important things. And next to that, doing insane things. Now, what we do know, though, is within his administration, half of them or most of them are for a strike on Iran. And we have Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner among those who are against it. And we know they have interest in Qatar. But I would also like to say, and I'll say this to Prime Minister Netanyahu and to President Trump, stop fantasizing about MBS and Saudi Arabia modernizing and all that. We applauded, he gave women the right to drive. And we just fawning all over MBS like he's some man. And I'll tell you something, it is true that he is educated and everything. Those are the most dangerous ones, the ones who know the West really well and smile. And there's Trump also with Ashara from Syria. You mentioned Syria, spritzing him with perfume. That's like putting lipstick on a pig if I ever saw it. Saying, you're a handsome guy, and other things. We have to be really careful about getting, the Brits used to all, in the past, always be enamored of the Arab world. They were sort of very patronistic, like, these cute Arabs, they're so exotic. We have to stop that crap already because all over the world, the Islamists are killing people. And all the West can do is say, be careful of Islamophobia.
Yes, that's the reaction for everything. And, you touched on Saudi Arabia, and I'm actually very worried. And only in the last few weeks, they basically turned against Israel and the West. They've now opened up two fronts against the UAE, and which is much more significant of anything, Al Arabiya, which has always been for the last few years trying to be neutral, trying to be step away from Al Jazeera, is now taking an editorial turn, which is actually very concerning. And so all these Jews and all these Israelis that were so excited about Saudi Arabia, I think things are not turning in the right direction with MBS. And I think he's made a decision maybe to turn away. I don't know what America can pull, but Ruthie, you mentioned our next subject, which is Gaza. Are we post-war Gaza? So Israel announced today that we're going to open the Philadelphia route, which is basically the border between Israel and Egypt, to human traffic. And on the one hand, you could say, well, that's letting people leave. On the other hand, you could say, well, that's letting terrorists come back in. And that is really the fear. And are we at stage 2, more significantly, without the disarming of Hamas? And then you look at what's happening in Davos, where basically they're saying, the war is over, we're going to build Singapore in Gaza. Now, I want to make it very clear that we would all love that. And that was the aspiration when we left, when Israel left in 2005. They could have built Singapore. They could have built Dubai. And instead, they made it into a terrorist hellhole. But there is still, in Davos, there's still a lot of hope that perhaps we could have a new Gaza. Watch this.
I think the combination of the Board of Peace with the kind of people we have here, coupled with the United Nations, can be something very, very unique for the world. For the world, this isn't, United States. This is for the world. As everyone can see today, the first steps toward a brighter day for the Middle East and a much safer future for the world are unfolding right before your very eyes. And of course, the war in Gaza, which is really coming to an end. We have little fires that were put out, but they were giant, massive fires, and now they're down to little fires, and we can put them out very easily. We have 59 countries that are involved in peace in the Middle East.
And this is what Kushner had to say.
I see a lot of people trying to escalate, criticizing Israel or Israelis criticizing Turkey or Qatar. Just calm down for 30 days. I think that the war is over. Let's do our best to try working together. Our goal here is peace between Israel and the Palestinian people. Everyone wants to live peacefully. Everyone wants to live with dignity. Let's put our efforts towards promoting those who are doing the work to build this up, like Ali and his committee. Let's focus on the positive stories, and let's just calm down, turn a new chapter. And if we believe that peace is possible, then peace really can be possible.
Oh, we are sick.
Literally what we were saying. Everyone wants to live in peace. Everyone wants to live in dignity.
And the sun identifies as the moon. Yes. We all want on Tuesday. Identified. Oh my. All right. Look, on the one hand, like you said, Ruthie, he's trying to create an alternative UN. And that is a good thing because the UN, as we know, have not just been useless, they've been damaging. They've made things worse. They're in bed with the terrorists. They've been completely impotent in Lebanon. They did not even warn Israel that Hezbollah was moving south of the Litani. So they're damaging. And he's kind of trying to get them out of the picture, which is a good thing. But you have the Qatari foreign minister and this board of peace. Are we joking? They are the arsonists of the region. However, maybe that's a feature and not a bug. The fact that you bring these people in so that they're committed to peace, and they're not the executive board of rebuilding Gaza, they're kind of the symbolic board. There's a few boards here. And as you kind of grunted earlier, one woman in this whole story, yes, not a great start when there's one woman in the three boards of peace. So you've got the executive board, which, as we know in companies, you've got the executive, and then you've got the symbolic board. I mean, does this have a chance in hell of working? What do you think, Bellamy?
I think it's great posturing starting off, but I think that's all it is right now. It's posturing. I love the fact that it's for him, it's an alternative of the United Nations because that had to have left ages ago. They've done nothing. You look at the continent of Africa, it's worse off now than it was before. And as something that I think was a beacon of hope before, what you would look into and say, okay, this will be the school teacher with the stick going, no, 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 no. They've just opened doors to hell. But the Board of Peace right now, my question is, as you said, that really makes me anxious is, why are you letting certain people in? And again, symbolic as an advisory board or whatever, that's lovely because you're starting to push the needle in the direction of saying, actually, there is an alternative. You're not it.
Yeah.
But is it going to go anywhere right now? No. I don't think that it is. It's just posture.
Well, I just don't know who's going to disarm Hamas. In the end, it's going to be IDF soldiers, isn't it?
The problem is what Trump is doing is he's using his own mindset, his own values to say, if they have enough motivation and if they have enough gain, if they have enough
financial incentives
and what is it called? When you're popular, cool. He's using his own set of values and a Western set of values, but that ain't what Turkey's looking for, and it's not what Qatar's looking for, and it's not. So my worry or my reality check is they're not thinking the same way you're thinking. So you're going to put them on the board, and you think they're going to come on and they're going to say, yeah, let's make Gaza the Riviera, and that's not what they want. So I don't know how far it can go before it falls apart.
Well, yes, but we could say, just to counter-argue that we got all our living hostages home,
right?
Thanks to that kind of relationship they've developed with Qatar. Is that not so, Ruthie?
Well, it is, but then, you bring in the scorpion and then he kills you, okay? It's true, okay? This is a very complicated situation.
Yes.
And we all legitimize Qatar in that sense. Even the Israeli government, while not doing it, not legitimizing Qatar, but saying we may have no choice. And the same thing goes for Egypt. Israel has a peace treaty with Egypt for decades, but Egypt was complicit in all the materials that went into Gaza to build the tunnels and in the terrorism. So, you know, Egypt is another problem. But what the reason, first of all, yes, if anybody has to disarm Hamas, it will have to be Israel. Nobody else is going to do it. Nobody else can do it. By the way, the UN, it's not just that it was damaging. All its institutions were actually, many were actually participants in terrorism around the world. And so there are very good things like the United States pulling out of the World Health Organization, which has done lots of damage, etc. And those things are positive developments. But as you pointed out, Shoshana, that mindset is exactly what got Israel into October 7th.
Yes.
You do not, jihadists and radical Islamists do not care about work permits and a better life.
Yes.
Gaza had a better life. Gaza had, every time there was a problem, billions of dollars, shekels, and euros went into the strip for rehabilitation. Every Gazan could have had a villa and a swimming pool. And by the way, the Hamas leadership did have villas, as all the IDF soldiers said when they went into Gaza. They saw these mansions. They could have had Singapore over there. That's not what they want. They want to kill infidels. That means Muslims who don't agree with them. That means Jews, Christians, and they're doing it all over the world. So we see that. And Trump can't get, I understand that. He's a businessman. He can't get it through his head that there's such a thing as an religious ideology. That is what is governing Iran and has been since 1979. And you can't appease them with better, like with a higher salary or something. It doesn't work.
Well, we know that because we also tried that. We let Qatar take money into Gaza. We gave work permits to the Gazans. We thought that they were deterred because we were giving them work permits, letting money in. And again, that's the bottom line, that I think people don't understand that you see the world in a certain way with a certain framework, incentives, a better life for your children. But to extremists, that is not their goal.
Look at the only people that, the only country, the only, nationality that we really don't have a big problem with next to us is Jordan. Jordan is quiet.
Well, Jordan is quiet because the jihadists also threaten the monarchy.
And the monarchy keeps them at bay. They do the work themselves. They are an example of a country that actually wants quiet.
Yes, except that they let a lot of arms being smuggled into Judea, Samaria, that then it turned on our soldiers.
True. I'm not saying they're perfect, but I'm saying if you look at our border, that's our longest border, that's our longest neighbor. True. So maybe there's something to be thought about. What's working here?
We have a good relationship.
We give a ton of water.
Although I just would like to say, Shoshana, and this is relevant to you especially, is that Queen Rania all along said women were not raped on October 7th, for example.
No, guys, I'm not thumping for Jordan. I'm just being practical. It's saying, if you look at the map.
Yes, ultimately, we can look at, Ruthie, you can also say that we just signed a 30-year gas agreement with Egypt. As you said, we have a water relationship with Jordan. And ultimately, a stable Israel is good for Jordan and Egypt, even though their rhetoric never changed, even though they're still spouting anti-Semitic Islamist crap about Israel because they want to keep their people at bay, which is a whole other problem.
And they did shoot down
the rhetoric, the reality, they did shoot down Iranian missiles, and it is in their interest for the jihadists to stay where they are and not move over. It's just to me, look, when I saw Jared Kushner's slideshow, I thought, I wish, no, listen. And he's got in this Israeli business entrepreneur, Yakir Gabay, who's been working on this for a number of years. I wish no Israeli would love nothing more, every Israeli would love nothing more than a prosperous, peaceful Vegas in Gaza that we could all go for the weekend and pay less than what we pay for Israeli hotels. I promise you, the Israelis love traveling. Tons of Israelis go to Sinai the whole time, even that, not even safe. Israelis go to Egypt all the time. Of course, Israelis go to Petra in Jordan. Israelis love to travel. We want their prosperity. The problem is, do they want their prosperity? Do they want their own prosperity? No. Or is there something else at play here? And unfortunately, when you connect the dots, and I'm glad that you mentioned, Shoshan, I'm glad you mentioned the Kurds, because there's another massacre going on that the media is not talking about, of course, because the oppressor-oppressed dynamic is not quite right for the mainstream media, is that there's a massacre going on right now in northern Syria with the Kurds. Women are being killed and raped and killed. And nobody said a word, and people are still justifying, egging them on. Al-Shara is, they gave him a new beard cut so that he looks like Herzl, and they put him in a suit, and the guy has appointed ISIS people everywhere around Syria.
There's still Druze women that have not been returned.
Yeah.
There are 200, I think, something like Druze women and girls who were stolen months ago. Never heard of somebody
go into a prison, right, where ISIS militia was being held. Release them.
Unbelievable.
Go ahead. Welcome back. So there's already a 2.0 that's at work. And to try to explain that to somebody else and saying they're literally taking women and little girls, not just raping them, completely going to actually keep them as sex slaves.
What Boko Haram does in Nigeria. It's the same thing.
And all that I feel it, the international women's movements all got stuck with bring back our girls back then. Everybody got stuck with holding up that sign saying bring back our girls, and that's it. Nothing's actually happened. And they're past that.
No.
Nothing's happened.
They don't get the progressives. You want to get behind something? Get behind that.
It doesn't have to be Israel.
And you know, another problem is here. Trump says, oh, ISIS is bad. We have to take care of ISIS in Syria. Okay. Really? And what do you think Ashara is, or what it was and still is? I mean, he's the one letting them out of the ISIS out of the prisons. So you know, President Trump is very confused about the good guys and the bad guys, and he has fantasies about it. And you know, hopefully, a lot of times I think, okay. You know, people said you can't take Trump literally, you have to take him seriously, right?
Yes.
And we've seen that happen many times.
Yes.
We've seen it, and thank God, up until now, it's mainly been for the good. So what we can say is, let's be a little patient here and see what develops. But what worries me, in addition to everything else about this day after the war in Gaza, is the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian, they say, you know what, we're going to have people there. We're going to give them arms, Palestinians who are not Hamas and not Fatah, and we're going to arm them to police Gaza. It sounds like Oslo. What, you're going to arm Palestinians who are not, and what exactly do you think they are?
The same people paying pensions to terrorists.
Exactly. And so, you know, this business of we're arming them, we've been there before. And all I think that means is that we're not done with this war. And by the way, if we're not careful, we're going to have another October 7th coming from Judea and Samaria, what people call the West Bank. Because there is massive terrorism going on there, weapons amassed, including attempts at tunnel building.
Yes.
So, you know.
Everywhere. The model is the same everywhere. People wake up. And on that note, we're going to make them wake up even more with our very popular segment, Scumbag of the Week. All right, ladies, wading scumbags every single week to find the best one for our wonderful, adoring audience. So, Bellamy, who is your scumbag this week?
My scumbag for this week is Hannah Obama. Go ahead and take a look at what she had to say.
I have trouble with the term liberal Zionism because I think it absolves the identifier of reckoning with the necessary elements for the ideology to thrive. It is a settler colonialist ideology to create a Jewish majority in the land of Palestine, and apartheid is the vehicle for that majority, and genocide, one of the great hypocrisies, right, of these Zionist leaders who say you cannot create a distinction between Jews and Israel. You cannot. They are linked. A genocide is committed, and people start to be angry with and blame Jews, all Jews, which is wrong. And they go, you cannot blame Jews for the actions of Israel. Well, you just said that they were linked, so which is it?
Today is today, tomorrow is tomorrow, today will be today. It's the word salad.
She's such a moron. Genocide, apartheid, fellow colonial state.
What a moron spouting out just slogans she heard from one of those stupid protests.
I think it's sickening even more with the fact that she loves to wear the red hand pin everywhere she goes, literally turning her back on her own people. But now all of a sudden she's the victim because she's gone from being as a Jew, not in my name, but actually don't look at me because I'm just a Jew. Because guess what? A Jew is a Jew is a Jew, Hannah. They don't care.
I saw it and I couldn't even watch it. I couldn't even watch
Watch
it.
this silly cow. I can't watch her. And I'm just praying that her career goes in the toilet of Hollywood history because people are just fed up with this sanctimonious. They're fed up.
Are they fed up with it? Well, let's hope so. I'll tell you one thing that drives me crazy. You see people like that who, you know, they get advanced degrees at illustrious universities in the United States. They are morons. They know nothing about history. They know nothing. And by the way, they also have bad grammar. You know, you know, these are also bothers Ruthie. That bothers me.
Ebonics.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, she's a complete moron and she's doing a lot of damage. And look, ultimately, I do think, maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but I just feel people are getting a little fed up with this. There were less red pins this year.
Definitely less red pins. She was the trophy of the one that actually wore it at the Golden Globes. But at the same time, she's going to ride this right till the end, and it's already going to be too late. That's what she doesn't understand. You're going to ride the wave so far in a different direction, and then expect all of your pals who aren't Jews to be there for you, to help you out. No one's going to be there. That's the truth.
I'm praying correct. I'm praying that in the end, she finishes her little whatever show that she's got, and the next show, like with Mark Ruffalo, doesn't come. That's what I'm praying because that's what that silly woman deserves. Okay, Shoshana, who's your scumbag of the week?
I have a very classic scumbag this week. Very classic, just to remind people, because you don't see it in the news, that there are actually real monsters in the world, not just Israel and Jews. Putin is my scumbag of the week. I read the news as I do every morning, and I see a video of a drone taken by a Ukrainian resident, a civilian, and this drone and you see it's coming towards a residential block, and it's almost like Russian roulette, with pardon the pun. You don't know where it's going to land, you don't know who it's going to hurt, and it slams right into the side of a residential building. Yeah. I don't know who was hurt, I don't know who was killed, and does anybody even care? Because if you don't see it, does it really happen? You know, I don't understand how Ukrainian babies are stolen and given to Russian families.
20,000 children
are
missing.
It's like nobody cares.
20,000 children are missing.
It's beyond my comprehension. Why? Because their ways don't matter? What? Why? Why does it matter? Why doesn't it matter? Why does the Russian bombing of civilians? And by the way, my cousin is very involved in a Jewish orphanage in Odessa. It was a hit. It was a hit by a missile. Thank God it was only one person was harmed. They had taken the children out already a while ago, but that's an orphanage. An orphanage was hit by a Russian missile, and nobody says a word.
Nobody.
So y'all are my scumbags.
Absolutely, Putin is arming the Islamic Republic with drones and with all sorts of military hardware, and nobody says anything about that.
Also, I would like to just also praise the Ukrainian people for something.
Yeah.
With all that, those massive amounts of babies and children who are kidnapped and killed and held and all that, you do not hear the Ukrainian people taken to the streets and blaming their own government for that, the way Israelis did. Bring them home, as though Prime Minister Netanyahu was holding hostages in his basement. You do not hear Ukrainians complaining that Zelensky is holding those babies in his basement.
No, nobody's
so I would
complaining.
like to say that.
Nobody's complaining.
They're blaming the right culprit, is what I'm saying, and that's Putin.
Well, exactly. I agree, and you're right, Ruthie. Thank you for always bringing up the Israeli left. When we had a discussion,
They can't help it.
No,
Can't help myself.
I find that many of the more extreme ones have got the same kind of brain fog that the progressives anywhere else around the world, and they don't seem to understand who the good guys and the bad guys are. Ruthie, who's your scumbag of the week?
Okay, this one is a boring one, but a necessary one, and that is so-called Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei.
Every week.
That's
Every
right.
week.
Yeah, listen, so we have recidivists all the time. What are you going to do? But he is the scumbag. Really doesn't do justice to his real evil. But it needs to be highlighted again and again. And he's also a coward.
Yeah.
Because he's hiding out in underground bunkers, and he and his people are putting their money. They're taking their money out of Iran and hiding it elsewhere. This is what we've been hearing reports of that as well. So he's a coward. He's slaughtering his own people. Although many Iranians would say, no, I'm sorry, we're not his people. But never mind. Anyway, so he's my scumbag this week.
Well,
and many weeks.
He is a very he's evil. He's Hitler.
Absolutely.
Really. He's
Yeah, he
Hitler.
is. There's no
But
question
he is
about it.
hiding in a bunker. I mean, he could do us all a favor and just kill himself like Hitler did, but he won't. And there were also images of his family getting out. I mean, these are real cowards. They will burn down their country if they're not ruling it. And that is what people don't realize.
There'd be more sheets at Harrods if he was just gone. He's constantly living in schmata. I mean, just go away already.
Yes,
people, you know, look up the ones that truly believe in this regime, which makes me sick to see just how brainwashed they are of this messiah almost that is their leader. They're revolutionaries, they're anti-imperialists, they're everything else. How are things going for you lifestyle-wise? Like, is this something that you really want to continue with?
But they live in a bubble. They live in a castle. They don't care.
Also, he doesn't care about Iran.
No,
the
he
Ayatollah Khomeini, when he returned after 14, 15 years in exile in France, and he got off the plane, and American reporters were all there, that he's coming back for the revolution, asking him, how do you feel about being back in Iran? And he said, I feel nothing. Because he cared about Islam.
Exactly.
Not Iran.
They are Islamist colonizers of the ancient civilization of an ancient people.
About Iran.
They don't care about Iran. They don't care about Iranians. It's not them. So my scumbags, and I'm going to do a category, are the people that after Kushner presented the plan, the Palestinians and, of course, the moronic progressives, said, they take one of these slides, they go out on Twitter and social media, and they're like, this is the worst thing that could happen. One guy called Moyad Harazan writes, this is the Gaza we want to return to. And he puts a picture of Gaza before October 7th, the Gaza that they were claiming was an open-air prison or a concentration camp. All of a sudden, it's not a concentration camp. All of a sudden, it's the Gaza that they built and no longer a sieged open-air prison, as they've been telling everyone for 2 years. Somebody actually was very funny on Twitter, said, it's a Schrodinger's Gaza. Is it this? Is it that? It's everything. Gaza was an open-air prison. Gaza was a concentration camp. Oh, now Gaza was a paradise that Israel destroyed. So he writes, we do not want a polished Gaza built by those who destroyed it. Don't worry, honey, we're not building it. We do not want a Gaza treated as land without people. Unfortunately, you're all still there. Or as an investment project for those whose hands are stained with the blood of our family. We do not want deception, false promises, or charity, really. You don't want charity. What have you been living off for the last 20 years? These people are actually deluded. They are liars. And when some decent prospect, I mean, whether we think or not that it's going to happen, whether we think or not it's got a chance, but you know
Nothing's good enough.
Kushner's got a vision. And the vision is a beautiful, prosperous seaside city where people could actually have a living, prosper, have a future for their children. But no, God forbid, we want Gaza in its simplicity. You mean terrorist hellhole. We want Gaza where we come from. Oh, I thought that you were living in an open-air prison. What do you want is my question. And this guy is accompanied by a whole bunch of
progressives from the West saying this is the worst thing that could happen to Gaza. Really? The worst thing that could happen to Gaza is that it looks like maybe one of the cities that you're living in. You're hypocrites. The people in Gaza who are rejecting this chance for something good to happen in their lives are hypocrites, are liars, and are terrorist supporters. They're all my scumbags this week.
I thought public housing was a good thing.
No.
I thought socialism was a good thing.
But
Schrodinger's Gaza.
All the GoFundMe's that people have raised, the millions and millions.
Milking, they're being
They're
built.
all in Pakistan.
Exactly. But that's one of the sickest things that happened was seeing what's happening with the Kurds right now. And I said, the Kurdish people were on their side.
Yes.
And they had literally been standing up for Palestine this whole time. They've been talking about that. They raised money for them. So the whole dream of all these Pakistanis and everybody that's in the US, everywhere else, please help this child with 5 fingers. It's AI. You know, it's like, what 6 fingers? I mean, like, what's going on? Their dream would die. You would literally unplug their whole MO. This is their whole life.
The industry of...
Yes. The grift would be...
The grift, exactly. It's the industry of lies, of grifting, and of aid, which is broken, as you explain always to us about Africa. That would all come to an end.
And also, what about their claim that they're refugees? I mean, Israel withdrew from Gaza, right? And what they're saying is, no, we need to go back home. Also, they want to go back home to Israel. Which home? If Gaza's their home, and they don't want Jared Kushner to come in and give charity to help them with their home, is that your home?
Yeah.
I thought you said that wasn't your home.
I pointed that out once on a Piers Morgan show. I said, well, hang on a minute. Is it home? Are they refugees? Where is their home? Again, Schrodinger's Gaza, as somebody pointed out very cleverly on X. Okay, and now we will cleanse ourselves after that with heroes, because yes, there are many heroes. And honestly, I've got to say, I meet heroes every day here and abroad. I get messages from Iranians every single day who are doing heroic things. And so we always must highlight the positive in this world. Otherwise, we wouldn't get out of bed.
True.
Bellamy, who is your hero this week?
My hero this week is Piers Morgan. Ooh. Yes, that is giving me spolkus, just to say. And the reason is that he made this guy that I can't stand, Roger Waters, who's a klafter, completely derail with one question. Take a look.
You rail a lot about America and about Donald Trump, but you live in America, right? I mean, there's an inconsistency there. Why live somewhere if you hate it so much or hate the leaders so much? Why don't you act on a point of principle, get off your backside and go and live in Iran or Venezuela? Live under one of these regimes that you think aren't too bad.
I, to some extent, am a voice for the voiceless. And I get told this by the voiceless millions of times every year in responses to the activities that I engage.
But I wouldn't call Nicolas Maduro
support.
Nicolas Maduro is not the voiceless, and nor are Hamas, and nor are the Iranian regime. Although it suits you to say I only stand up for the voiceless, actually, it sounds to me like you like to stand up for terror groups and call them resistance. You like to stand up for dictators and say they're just massively misunderstood guys. You like to stand up for one of the world's worst regimes in Iran and pretend that the only reason people there are protesting is because of the economy, and that's because of sanctions put on it by other countries wrongly because they don't prop up any terror groups. So when I look at your worldview, I don't see a guy, with all due respect, Roger, who's standing up for the voiceless and powerless. I see somebody trying to prop up terrorists and powerful dictatorships and regimes.
Now that is what I've been waiting for ages. And I give Piers a hard time all the time because
he deserves it.
But that one moment when, and the arrogance of Roger Waters, I'm a person that speaks up for the voiceless. Where? You were speaking to a chair not so long ago.
Yes, the terrorists. He's giving a voice. He's a PR for the terrorists. He is a washed-up old alcoholic who is just mean, but he should go to Iran. I would love to see him and Hannah Heinbinder, whatever Feinbinder, whatever her name is, that idiot. They should all go to Iran, see how that works out. Excellent. You know what? We like to give people their dues.
Absolutely.
We've called him out when he's given a platform to horrible haters. But I think it's very worthy of you to bring him up when he does something good. Thank you so much. Shoshana, who's your hero?
Okay, my heroes are the Sikh population that went into, you have to see this video, but don't show it yet because I want to talk first. There's something magnificent about seeing people stand up for their fellow sisters, brothers, people, whatever it is. They're, you know, the pedophile grooming situation in England.
Yeah.
So these, a group of people, they've gone to the police did nothing.
Nothing.
And they got together and they went to get out their sister from an apartment of the pedophile. You have to watch this video. Every time I see it, I'm like crying, I'm like chills. It is magnificent. This is how you do it. Show the video.
Come on, you pervert! Listen, mate, we're not here to cause a problem, yeah? We just want a word with you. Open the door, mate. We want to know if you want this why that girl at the age of 14 was groomed and then made to run away from home at the age of 16 by a man that's in his early 40s. I know you're there watching me at the door, my friend. Open the door. Mate, if I was you, I'd look at the window. There's over 200 of us there, mate. This problem ain't gonna go away. It's in your best bet, let that fucking girl go home, I'm telling you now, because you ain't gonna be able to show your face in public again. I promise you that.
inside? The girl is inside?
Do you understand what that guy is? He's a paedophile. He's a paedophile. There's been 2 other cases which involves him. You don't even know he's talking to other girls. I'm turning a blind eye to this. The parents have gone to the police many, many times and nothing is being done about this. Why is this allowed in 2026 in the UK?
We don't agree with grooming, manipulation, abuse. She will not convert. We are Sikhs and we're standing together.
We've come to get our niece, our daughter back. We're getting her back. But now we've got to make sure she doesn't come back. It's been going on for 9 years. He's been bringing young children, young girls, young boys going in and out of that flat. We can't let this carry on. Not in our community, not in any community. We stand together united. Bully Sonia!
That's what I want to see on the streets of the UK all the time. That's what I'm talking about.
Did they get her out? What happened here?
I didn't get to follow up on the story like in other outlets because I was just watching this on repeat. But apparently this guy has been reported multiple times and everybody knows about it and nobody did shit. And they were like, well, then I guess we're getting in the streets. And that's what they went and did. So I want to follow up. I do think they took him and I do think they got her home. I think so, but I can't.
It's just almost incredible to believe, like that guy said, that this is happening in 2026 and the police are complicit. The way that we've seen them being complicit, they're just cowards. They're just cowards.
Disgusting. It's disgusting. But this type of like coming together, like this is what humanity is meant for, right? Not sitting in the streets screaming, you know, intifada, intifada, but when someone's in danger, you go and you like that's humanity.
But you know what the saddest thing is? That in these Islamist countries,
all the time.
This happens all the time. This is part
legally,
exactly. This happens legally all the time, and this is what they've imported into the UK.
And in the UK, it's not just that the police are turning a blind eye; it's the courts. You know that they have actually sort of unofficial, hopefully not official, but unofficial for sure, Sharia courts in Britain, where there have been Muslim women who have gone to the regular law enforcement in Britain, saying, "Rescue me," or "My husband is doing this," or domestic violence, and they say, "Take it to your religious court."
So basically, the court system in the UK is washing their hands off these women.
Exactly.
It's disgraceful. They're in a Western country to be protected. Otherwise, they'd stay back where they were.
Exactly.
Oh, Lord, give us strength. Ruthie, who's your hero this week?
Okay, my hero this week, again, this could be a recidivist hero as far as I'm concerned, but this hero is more of an intellectual hero than someone brave actually in the streets. That's Mark Levin. And I'll tell you why I think he's been a hero.
Yeah.
Mark Levin is very, very supportive of President Trump.
Yes.
And but despite that, he never pulls any punches when he's critical of anything that the Trump administration is doing. And that does take bravery because he gets it from the left all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. But the fact that he is able to say Qatar is evil, Turkey is evil, why are they, Saudi Arabia, why is that part of it won't be part of the Abraham Accords? He said that this peace plan for Gaza, he is critical despite his utter support for President Trump. And to me, that's intellectual heroism.
I completely agree. He was my hero. I think it was last week or the week before, because of how also what a voice he's been for the Iranian people. You know, and the Iranian people are saying, thank you, Mark, for being our voice near the White House, you know, connected to the White House. So I think he's a fantastic hero. And you're right, he's just brave. And bravery is something which is in short supply these days, it turns out. And that goes very nicely with my hero, who I had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing only a few days ago, Gad Saad. Because Gad Saad is that guy in academia. He is literally a lone voice. He wrote his first book called The Parasitic Mind. He gave a lecture on that in Tel Aviv on last Thursday, and it's on JNS. Please come and watch it. And then I got to do a little Q&A with him. And now he's written another book called Suicidal Empathy. And he had to stop lecturing in his university in Canada, Concordia, because he had to go to class under armed guard. And it turns out Concordia didn't want to protect him very much. So now he's in Mississippi University. And the point is that he's saying what nobody is saying. And basically the theme of what we've been talking about in this episode, which is that the world is walking towards mass suicide because they're not actually seeing the problem of Islamist fundamentalism, which is a civilizational struggle, which is the major threat of civilization today. He talks specifically about the woke. In The Parasitic Mind, he talks specifically about the fact that the academic class, the professors, are the most cowardly people, and they are living in this bubble of moral relativism. There's no truth. There's no truth by them. There's no truth. Men can menstruate and, you know, and can have babies. And, you know, there's no such thing as the sun. Apparently, this professor told him that the sun could be a dancing hyena because there's no such thing. There's no objective truth. That is the world that he's had to fight against. And he's honestly one of the very few people that are still in that fight. His life is, you know, is under threat every single day. The hatred he gets is compounded by the fact that, of course, he's Jewish. So on top of all that, he gets Jewish hatred, apart from academic hatred and apart from the world going against him. And he's the only guy saying what's really happening, which is that everybody's marching off a cliff. And so I wanted to give him a shout out for coming to Israel. And I wanted to give him a shout out for his new book, which is now in pre-order. So go out there and order Suicidal Empathy. And for being here in Israel and standing firmly with truth, because he understands that there's still such a thing as truth. So Gad Saad, who I had the pleasure of meeting, he's my hero this week.
Lovely. And I'll add to that. First of all, it's a great interview. And Gad Saad on social media, he said, I've been in Israel now, I don't know how many days, but he said, and he speaks fluent Arabic. He said, I spoke Arabic to my taxi driver. I spoke Arabic to someone in a store and a doctor because he heard his leg. Yeah. So he went to the doctor and he said, and the pharmacist spoke Arabic everywhere to Arabs in Israel. And he said that the idea that there's any problem with certainly not apartheid, but that Arab Israelis and Israelis get along just fine. Thank you very much. That there are these lies spread about it.
You should tell Hannah.
Yes. Well, maybe we should have God give a lecture to Hannah and her ilk. But yes, I mean, that's what we're doing here. Everything we're trying to expose the truth. And so we're very grateful for our wonderful audience. And with everything going on, we pray for the freedom of the people of Iran. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from the region. The possibility of a U.S. strike against Iran is moving dangerously closer. Trump says Tehran wants to negotiate, but has also given Iran a direct deadline to accept a deal he considers as fair and just, including a deal in which the regime gives up its nuclear weapons. This is the goal for Donald Trump, and according to the American president, failure to agree to a deal will lead to military action. Have a listen to some of Trump's latest remarks.
Are you giving Iran any kind of deadline to make a deal before potentially taking
Only
military
they
action?
know for sure.
Have you communicated that to them
Yeah,
directly?
I have.
We could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons. They should do that, but I don't know that they will. But they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
Trump added that an armada is on its way to Iran. A U.S.-guided missile destroyer was seen this morning off the southern port of Eilat. As additional naval and air assets move into the region, all this signals that Washington is positioning for rapid action should the ongoing talks collapse. But the regime, they're threatening back. Ayatollah Khamenei said this morning that if the United States were to open a war front against Iran, the escalation would be regional. As speculation grows, IDF Chief Eyal Zamir visited Washington this weekend to hold high talks with top U.S. officials on what comes next. And moving on to Gaza, where, as promised, the Rafah crossing is opening today, symbolizing the official transformation into Phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire plan. Foreign aid trucks and ambulances were seen piling up by the border crossing this morning, waiting to enter the Strip as Israel and Egypt work to ensure the crossing is used lawfully. The crossing will not be open for the transfer of goods or aid, as the Rafah crossing has been a notorious hotspot for weapons smuggling from Egypt into the Gaza Strip for 2 decades, an issue the IDF is attempting to monitor closely. Instead, only Gazans who previously left the Strip, medical patients, dual citizens, and others will be permitted to return after undergoing security screenings at an IDF checkpoint. With the NCAG, or the technocratic Palestinian body set to govern Gaza and replace Hamas, still with no official entry date, Rafah will be open and Hamas will still be in charge. All of this unfolds in the southern Gaza Strip as the IDF releases footage of the dismantling of a terror tunnel in Khan Yunis. The tunnel contained dozens of weapons, including RPGs, grenades, rifles, and more, 3 living quarters, and stretched for hundreds of meters, according to the military. Troops of the 188th Armored Brigade and Yahalom unit dismantled the tunnel, eliminating the threat and disposing of the weapons hidden inside. This after a weekend development that saw 32 Palestinians killed in IDF airstrikes targeting Hamas gunmen who emerged from a tunnel near Rafah, according to the army. 3 of the gunmen were killed, a senior Hamas commander was captured, and the incident triggered a broader operation against terror infrastructure. And today, the government approved a plan to rebuild one of Israel's most hard-hit cities in the last 2 years, Kiryat Shmona. This development follows a visit by Prime Minister Netanyahu today in the municipality hall, where he said that the country is dedicated to the rehabilitation of the area. Kiryat Shmona, Israel's northernmost city, has suffered relentless rocket fire from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon from October 8, 2023, all the way through to November 2024, when a U.S.-brokered ceasefire was signed. Today, Netanyahu announced that a university will be built in the city in an effort to attract newcomers, but also inspire those who have long evacuated to return home. And finally, Israel is facing an unprecedented heat wave in the middle of January. A dust storm from North Africa has entered the region, causing unusually hot weather in this winter month. Strong winds are set to pick up, and the meteorological services say dry southern air will push temperatures up to around 25 degrees in the mountains and nearly 30 degrees in the coastal plain and the northern Negev, levels not seen in Israel since 1987. And before we go, I want to remind you to scan the QR code that's on your screen to get access to our ILTV WhatsApp channel for all of the latest updates and breaking stories. But for now, that's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. I'm Devo Klein, and thank you so much for watching and for joining today.
the regime in Iran is very predictable in that they would never try to confront you, not directly, if they don't guarantee victory. They are terrified of one man and one man only. It's not Donald Trump. It's Benjamin Netanyahu.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV. We are so happy to welcome back our viewers and our listeners. Today we have a guest that you have not met before, somebody who is unique in where she comes from, what she stands for, and more importantly, the work she has done. Catherine Peretz-Shakdam, the executive director of We Believe in Israel. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, Catherine, before we get into all of the Iran and the geopolitics and everything that is going on today, I actually want to start with you. You have a very interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Born in a Jewish family in France, married a Yemenite Muslim, if I understand correctly,
Yes.
and then lived in the Islamic world only later to return to your Jewish identity. We don't have forever, but give me in 3-4 minutes, who you are, how this came to be. How do you describe yourself?
Okay, very confused, I think I was at the very beginning. So, like you said, I grew up in a very secular Jewish background. I come from Sephardi heritage, if you speak to my father. If you speak to my mother, who passed away, but on my mother's side, Ashkenazi. So I'm a mix. But my dad holds on to the Sephardi bit. And so was born and raised in Paris, went to study in LSE, London School of Economics in London, and I met the man who would become my future ex-husband. At the time, I think I was very confused about who I was. I was 18. I had lost my mother when I was 11, grew up in boarding school, so pretty much on my own. And I was just looking for my place in the world. And, this man came into my life with very strong ideas about who he was, his position in relation to religion. And having been raised tolerant, I was under the impression that it didn't matter, love would conquer all. Now looking back, I don't think I was in love. I think I was just looking for a way to belong and to be accepted, because I had felt abandoned many times over. So I definitely had issues that I have dealt with ever since. And so I married. I had 2 children. We went to live in Yemen for a little bit. It was fun. And my experience in Yemen was not fun. So I was confronted with the reality of radicalism in its most abject form. This is not to say that Yemen is just that, but that was my experience. It was brutal. It was violent, psychologically draining. And as my identity as a Jewish woman and a Jewish mother, because I had 2 children, was being questioned, challenged, picked on, that everything that Israel was doing, good or bad, was blamed on me somehow, because I belonged to, the great Zionist entity. And up until that point, I never thought myself a Zionist, not in that sense. I knew that, of course, Israel was home. But I never thought about it that way because I was very apolitical. But the reality of geopolitics caught up with me. And then I got curious due to my education, due to the fact that I was in Yemen. And I wanted to understand this Islamic world that came crashing against me. And I discovered that the Islamic Republic was to blame, as well as the Muslim Brotherhood. And so began a journey, I would say, of self-discovery. I think they ignited the flame of Zionism in me, which I think is quite interesting because they tried to beat it out of me. But when I found that when something happens within us, and I do believe that our DNA speaks really loudly in times of crisis, where I was again being destroyed, and they tried to claim my identity, to slap another one onto it, because they wanted me to convert, and I refused. To great risk, because it wasn't, I have a few scars because of it, yes. There was violence, a lot of violence. But I refused. There was something in me that just couldn't bow.
What did your husband do during this time?
Torture me, essentially.
He wanted you to convert as well?
He wanted me to, no, that was him. So the Jewish identity was very much hidden. Thank God for that, to be fair. Okay. Only his very close family knew about it. For everybody else, I had converted. And so I was thinking, okay, this is a good cover because everybody is under the impression of. And the fact that I was a woman in a very chauvinistic world, people don't ask questions about you, who you are, what are your aspirations. They couldn't care less. You can make brownies, they're good. You can make babies, even better. And so I used their prejudices, their bias towards me, towards, this belief that if you marry a Muslim man, Islam is so great, of course you're going to convert. And I was like, okay, let's play the game. But my husband had it in his mind that I had to. He wanted to break me.
So when did you start to meet with Islamic leaders and begin to understand the depth of this very toxic culture that you describe?
Okay, so it started off in Yemen, really. They were actually the most secular of people because my daughter used to go to the French school in Sana'a, and that meant that you had a lot of the elite, the Yemeni elite, who used to go there, their children. And so my daughter decided to make friends with the daughter of the president's nephew. And one play date after the other, I became friends with the wife. She was a lovely woman, by the way, and met her husband, Yahya Saleh, who was a nephew and the commander of the Central Security Forces in charge of fighting Islamism. So that was fun. And I was introduced to power in the Middle East. That gave me a really good read on the advances of the Islamic Republic of Iran into Yemen. Came rolling in the Arab Spring. And slowly I found myself in a position where I became somewhat of a pawn for the Islamic Republic, where my writings got picked up. And they thought, I set a net. And I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to say the right things, not too loudly, that it doesn't feel forced, just enough that maybe you'll come and get me. And they did. And they see the world in such a binary way that it's the case of if you criticize America, you must be pro-regime, which exists only in the head. And so I was introduced to this whole network that they have. So before you can get to the regime, you have to go through all the proxies. And apparently Russia, I have found, where Russia today acts as a gatekeeper in a way where a lot of the Islamist ideologues go through those channels. And I think it had to do with the fact that Nader Talebzadeh, who was the ideologue of the regime in Iran, was very good friend with the ideologues that sits in Russia. And so I discovered a few friendships that were quite interesting in the read that I had on the region. And slowly, I worked my way up that pyramid to get to Ayatollah Khamenei.
Wow, and you sat with him?
I sat with him. I had an audience. Well, and I literally sat on the floor. So it was really, yeah. He was on a chair and I was on the floor. It was the most insane situation that you could think of because, here I was pretending to be, and I was thinking I'm very Jewish sitting in front of a man who wants me dead. But he didn't know that.
But what did you talk about?
Well, I didn't talk. Look, I answered 2 questions with no, because I was instructed to not speak, only if spoken to, briefly, never look at him in the eye, which I was fine with. He kind of dispensed his wisdom upon me in a very patronizing way.
What did he say? What's his wisdom?
Well, he wanted to know. So the first question that told me everything I needed to know about the regime, he wanted to know whether I felt that God was a megalomaniac and was cruel. And I'm like, well, again, secular education, but very much believe in God. And I was like, well, no. And he was telling me, well, then why is it that people complain when people die under my orders? And I was like, okay, so that's called murder. Mm-hmm. Also, there's life. There's death. It's a cycle. It's a thing, but there's no responsibility as such. You can't look at the cycle of life, through the lens of good and bad. It doesn't work this way. It's what happens in between the two that matters. And I was like, okay, so you trying to make yourself into the divine, claim it for yourself. And then I understood that actually this war that is very geopolitical is actually against the divine. that ultimately their goal is to kill God. Very much like the Marxists, were saying that the religion is the opium of the people.
Right.
So they took it a step further in that they want to use religion, faith, in that case Islam, twist it into something that is obscure, dark, and radical, wield it as a weapon against communities by convincing them that such terms as jihad and whatever is holy, that they're committing the worst atrocities in the name of God, but not God with a capital G, them.
So, Catherine, why did they trust you to even get to Khamenei, and when did all of that trust shift?
It wasn't about trust. I don't think that they trust each other, never mind me. I was meant to be a pawn, a tool that they could use, an instrument. They are desperate at the time. I don't know if they think that way.
When was this?
It was so I got invited to Tehran in 2017.
Okay.
And I really got out in 2018 where I was like, I'm done. It was becoming too dangerous in that people were starting to ask questions. And when enough people tell you that, oh, you kind of, there's a Middle Eastern feel to you. And I'm like, ooh, maybe time to go. And also, I think that the mask was slipping where I got so disgusted. You sit with evil long enough. Something in me was rebelling. I couldn't contain it anymore. I had locked myself away in a box because even when I was back home in the UK, you have to surround yourself by those people. First of all, they make sure that you do. They could, they keep a close eye on you. And so I couldn't afford to have friends or to be myself ever. It's very taxing on a person. You tend to forget. The lines become blurred in that who are you really at the end of the day? And so, this little box that I had in my head, was kind of saying, okay, because my Jewish name is Esther. Esther wanted to come out and play and be herself. And so I stepped into the light and said, no more, I can't do it. And the pandemic helped me to detangle myself from, because the worry was you're going to get killed. But when Raisi was elected, and I heard people say, oh, he's a reformist, we could work with him. I was like, no. I need to tell the world that this man is actually the worst of evil. He's called the butcher, he was called the butcher of Tehran for a reason. And so I decided to take a chance and to tell the tale. And a bomb exploded in Tehran, not literally, but they were like, okay, so we'll let a Jew in. And I was like, yeah, and a woman too, and I'm going to cut you off at the knee and show you what is it that a Jewish woman can do in this world. Speak truth to power. I'm not special. I didn't do much in the face of everything. But I think we taught them a lesson in that sometimes the smallest of person with nothing other than a pen can do a great deal of harm.
Because you were writing articles about this and opinion pieces, that kind of thing.
I was writing for them for a little bit where I had to pedal to their, lunacy. Now I pedal to the truth. I told the truth. I exposed them and they don't like it. And what I found very interesting is that every time, because I'm a great believer in timing, so whatever intelligence I have, data, is only it's worthwhile if it matters and helps the conversation. Otherwise, nobody really wants to know. And so I've been careful. And that means that I've never told everything because I don't believe that, first of all, it would be for my gain. I really don't care. I want to put what I've learned in the service of Israel and Jewish people. And so I do it when it's the right time. And they hate it because they kind of figured that out. And they tried to out me. So initially, I only talked about my meeting with Raisi, thinking Khamenei will cost me my life a bit too much, too early. And then the BBC outed me. So they went, well, I did this live. And they were telling me, have you met with Khamenei? And I said, no, because I was trying to protect myself, my children, and, my head.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, we have it on the good authority that you did. And I was like, well, there's only one way that would happen, is that you spoke to them. So who are you really? Was my first question. And then they did great many things in terms of trying to sully my character. Never responded because I'm not interested. People who know. Those who want to believe whatever, that's fine by me. I don't care. Sticks and stones. So the story went on where every time that I have told the truth, they go really quiet because there's nothing to say. So they tried everything. They tried to sully my character. They tried to shame me. They tried to threaten me. They tried
The
many
Iranians.
things. Yes, of course, the regime. They don't know what to do because us Jews don't function like the rest of the world. You don't get to shame us with weird allegations. I'm really solid of where I stand in terms of my family values, my values full stop, my loyalty. So they can't buy that. Very confusing to them. They don't understand courage either. Not in the absence of fear, because I'm not silly, but there are things worth dying for. This is one of them, this land, and so they don't get that.
What happened to your children during all of this?
So I protected my kids the best I knew how, and I'm glad to say they're actually very healthy, well-adjusted. They were good. I taught them our stories as fairy tales because I had no other way to translate us and to kind of share a tradition. So when my son did his bar mitzvah, he was thinking, but I know this already. I was like, I know, because I told you. The transition was easy because they were always Jewish. So there was no transition for them. Their father wasn't interested in teaching them religion, in that he didn't know anything himself, not really. It was all about control. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid to say that in his mind, his kids were commodities to be bargained with and for. And I was like, no, you are the keeper of two little souls that you're going to see nurture and see grow. They don't belong to you.
So you took them away from him?
Of course I did. I mean, he wasn't too interested in my daughter, which is charming. My son, I explained that if he touched a hair on my kid's head, he would have hell to pay. He believed me. Good for him. Yeah. I'm a mama. You don't take my babies. And he left and never looked back, even though I was willing to allow, visitation because he's their father at the end of the day. But he chose the cowardly way out.
Is he in Yemen now?
I have no idea.
Wow. And where you're living in France?
No, I live in the UK.
In the UK now, in the UK. So, tell me, you, from the outside and from the things you're describing, Iran appears very, very rigid, very religious and rigid and very all-powerful as a dictatorship. But from the inside, is that how it really is? How do the people living there really view the regime and how do they view themselves?
It's a very strange construct. I feel people in Iran, the best way I could describe it, it's a life interrupted in that they were taken over and colonized by this foreign ideology that is radicalism. So they sell it to you as religion. It's a theopolitical construct that exploits God to sell power.
Okay.
And power they have sold and encroach onto society to the point where people have become enslaved, in that there is no way out of the system. And what I find interesting is that the left, that is so keen on speaking against slavery and all manners of servitude, somewhat allied itself to what I call theofascism, this radicalism that they constructed with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Do you think the Iranian regime is as dangerous as it appears? With we're recording this. I mean, I usually don't even say when we're recording and when it's releasing, but given the news that's going on today, we're within days potentially of a U.S. attack on Iran. Is Iran going to try to use nuclear or destroy Israel?
First of all, they don't have it in the sense that they have some things. They don't have a nuclear weapon as such. They can have a dirty bomb.
Yeah.
Now, the world is, of course, at risk. Now, the argument against an attack, I think, is moot in the sense that if you don't do something now, you're going to have to do something later. I'd rather do it now, because the more we wait, the more costly it will be, because you're allowing a monster to grow its tentacles, and at some point somebody's going to have to kill this hydra. Let's call it today. And it's on us. We should have done it 49 years ago or something. We haven't. It's on us. And when I say us, I mean a collective us. It's not up to Israel to save the rest of the world. And I'm tired of hearing people say, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? Why is it down to Israel to save the day when we try to save our lives? We are called genocidal, crazy people.
But do you think the Iranian regime is so evil that when the U.S. attacks, it will unleash just to stay in power?
So this is what I think. And actually, it's not what I think. That's what they said, but we don't listen. So about a week ago, when Donald Trump famously said, locked and loaded, help is on the way, all of that. Very theatrical. The Iranians, the regime panicked. And so a statement was issued by the Iranian parliament. And I found it so interesting that people picked it up. Reuters published it and all the rest of the, legacy media. Yeah. But no one commented on it or actually understood what that meant. And I'm like, hello, been talking about it for years. Can you please read what they are telling you? So they warned that should a hair be misplaced or displaced on Khamenei's head, they would declare jihad, get that, on Arab countries. For the first time in a really long time, Israel was not even mentioned. And I was like, okay, so information number one, the subtext of this is that you understand the regime in Iran is very predictable in that they would never try to confront you, not directly, if they don't guarantee victory. Okay? Now, they will attack you if they feel that it's in response of an attack that they cannot possibly ignore. But then again, and you recall, when they did attack Israel with 600 ballistic missiles and whatever else that they sent our way, they did so by warning us about a gazillion times before, knowing that nothing would get through. They were hoping that maybe something theatrical would happen, but they were also very worried about the response. And also, something that people need to understand and take into this equation when it comes to the regime is that they are terrified. And again, this is not my opinion. This is out of the mouth of commanders of the RSGC and Basij and everyone else in between that is really close to Khamenei. They are terrified of one man and one man only. It's not Donald Trump. It's Benjamin Netanyahu. They always have been. Why? Because they see in him, and I think that, the story of Yoni and everything that he, Entebbe and all that. Look, whatever people feel about Bibi is completely beside the point. They see him as someone who's the carrier of Israel's tradition, military tradition, and this determination that when all fails, one guy is going to stand up and tell you exactly how it's going to go. And they're scared of that, this determination. Bibi is a soldier. He fought. Right. His family fell. And so he's someone who understands that kind of sacrifice. I'm not talking about the politics of it all before people jump on my throat. I'm talking about the man behind. And so they fear the man. Not the politician, but the man. That is important when you're about to go to war with a country. The second man they're scared is Yossi Cohen. Yossi Cohen is the one who humiliated them beyond what they could ever, fear. He beepers, number one. Number two, what they don't know, he could have done, maybe did, that they can't even imagine, because after the beepers, somebody had a really good conversation. Can you imagine that conversation where somebody imagined that and somebody, Yossi, said, yes, a great idea, let's do it, and did it? You had a drone factory built under the nose of the regime, 10 kilometers away from Khamenei's bunker. Somebody did that. That somebody is Yossi Cohen. So we need to kind of, reframe, I would say, the picture and say, we have two great men in Israel that have saved all of us. Wow. It's true. Look, I'm forever grateful to those two men. Why? Because they saved not just Israel, but the Jewish world. They recentered Israel in the middle of the Middle East and said, maybe you hate us still, maybe you will attack us tomorrow, but we're going to make it hurt when you do. That matters in the Middle East. So now the Iranian regime has to contend with the reality of the situation that is, you have guardians in Israel. There is, of course, one that is mighty, but they are his army. And we don't get to sleep much. So, I say we, I don't even count myself in this because I've done nothing. But seriously, those two men are giants for me in terms of, and I'm going to stop gushing. But, so yes, they're scared of that. And because of those two, no, I don't think they will attack Israel because it will be pointless. Also, the idea of just rolled out a few new toys that they, interestingly kind of advertised a few weeks ago, saying, hey, you guys, we got new stuff to play with. Do you want to come and play with us? The answer would be no. I mean, the last time, for 12 days, they sat on their hands watching the IDF fly by.